Testing, testing. Testing for the sound. Thank you, thank you. Hannah's on the line? Okay, great, thank you. Everyone's microphone working? Testing, testing.
Test.
Hello, Dolores is here.
Madam Chair,
Testing.
testing, I can't hear.
Testing. Is this working? Yes.
Hello, Hannah's here. Can you hear me?
Yes, Hannah, we can hear you. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Oh, I put my glasses on. Hello, everyone. I call the meeting of the Select Board to order tonight, Tuesday, December 19th at 6:03 p.m. Motion to open the meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. For roll call vote, Mr. Gito.
Here.
Mr. McCrisky.
Here.
Vice Chair Cavey.
Here.
Mr. Carrara.
Here.
I ask all that are able to stand to salute our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. In accordance with Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, which extends the Governor's March 12, 2020, order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, GLC 30A, Section 20, until March 31st, 2025, this meeting will be conducted both in person and virtually via Google Meets. This meeting will be recorded by SMAC Cable Television and broadcast live and may be live streamed at www.stoughtontv.org. A recording of the meeting, transcript, or other comprehensive record of the proceeding will be posted on the town's website and or SMAC as soon as possible after the meeting if the live broadcast or live streaming is unsuccessful. Times are approximate and items may be taken out of order at the chair's discretion. Madam Wise, would you like to open your meeting?
I'd like to call to order the school committee as part of the joint meeting with the select board on December 19th. The time is, 6:05 p.m. Could I have a motion to open the meeting?
Second.
All right, the motion's been made by Fabian. Do I have a second? The motion's been seconded by Armando. Roll call vote. Armando?
Aye.
Fabian? And myself, aye.
Thank you. All right. So, Town Manager, did you, Mr. Coulter, did you have opening comments to lead us into item number 1?
Yes, I do, Madam Chair, and thank you for the opportunity. Good evening to all. Madam Chair, I would like to welcome Superintendent Bayetta and members of the school committee. We appreciate you coming into our house to discuss this very important issue. I'd like to take just a minute to summarize the FY25 budget process, which, as you know, per state law and the town's Stoughton charter, is a process overseen by this board. On December 5th, we presented the expense portion of the operating budget. We appreciated the members' comments and recommendations. On December 12th, we received an informative presentation outlining best practices for estimating budget revenues. The third bucket in the FY25 budget structure is joint costs. This evening, we are once again joined by Hannah York, a principal in CLA Consulting. CLA is a Massachusetts leader in municipal and state regulations pursuant to school and town budgeting processes and the use of best practices. Madam Chair, on December 28th, we will present our comprehensive FY25 operating budget and joint cost recommendation to the Select Board. On January 16th, the Select Board will submit its FY25 operating budget and joint cost policy statement to the Stoughton Finance Committee. Before the Select Board and School Committee is our joint cost recommendation. Contrary to statements made at the School Committee meeting last Tuesday night, This proposal is consistent with the guidelines issued by DESE and the advice and guidance provided to us by CLA Consulting. The proposal is open and transparent and does not transfer a single cent, not a single cent, from the school budget to the town budget. Putting those statements made on Tuesday aside, I ask only that the stakeholders listen carefully to Ms. York's presentation and to then ask as many informed questions as you can. I would like to close by clarifying a statement I have made on several occasions, which seem to be the source of continued debate. As a former school committee member, one who participated in the construction of 3 schools, I understand the importance of balancing the need to invest in education with our citizens' ability to support those worthy investments. A primary variable in every investment decision is the cost of borrowing. 3 factors are considered in calculating the cost of municipal debt. First is the market interest rate. Second is the quality of the municipality's financial statements. And third is the risk assigned to the loan by the bonding agencies. That risk is determined by the financial condition of the community and by its commitment to the use of established best practices. Those 3 factors will determine the feasibility of every school and municipal project. The presentation you're about to hear from CLA is not about an internal fight over limited resources. It's about our shared commitment to the best practices provided to us by DESE and DOR. When CLA Consulting, our bonding agents, and our outside auditors review the town's finances, they'll be looking at, among other things, whether the town has implemented the best practices available. Ultimately, under state law and the town's charter, it is the board's policy and decision-making that creates a budget that allows Stoughton to put its best foot forward. With that, Madam Chair, through you, I would like to introduce the members of the Stoughton School Committee and our superintendent to Hannah York, principal in CLA Consulting. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Calder.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Is someone going to put up the presentation, or should I be sharing it from my desk?
If I may, Madam Chair, Jill and I just discussed it. Hannah, during your presentation, we're going to keep just the presentation up, and as soon as you're done with your presentation, we'll take that down and we'll see only you on the screen. So
Okay.
right now, we're going right to the presentation.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you.
I'm not familiar with Annie. Who is she?
Oh, she is the principal partner in CLA Consulting.
Yeah, so
Please lose your microphone.
She's going to tell you.
I have a few questions for her.
Oh, we're going to have questions right at the end of her presentation.
I want to ask the questions before,
Through you, Madam Chair.
if I may, ma'am.
Sure.
Yes.
Yes, I've been reading some of your presentation.
Please use your microphone.
Sure. I've been reading some of the presentation right up
Okay,
front.
I'll ask.
It pretty much, there's a disclaimer. I'm sorry, I'm trying to find where you are. There's a disclaimer. If I'm reading this correctly, pretty much that CLA is not responsible or obligated for any issues that may occur from this presentation. It seems kind of strange that you're going to present something that the disclaimer says you're not responsible for.
Excuse me,
And also to seek
Mr.
consulting.
Barbosa?
Yes.
In all due respect, we're going to follow the agenda. We're going to allow Hannah to introduce herself, give a background, and do her presentation. And you're free to ask any questions that you have after she goes through the presentation. We're going to try to stay as close to the time allotted as possible.
And we can speed that up by answering my questions.
Well, we want the full board to have the privilege of hearing from Hannah as well as yourself.
You're not going to,
We will allow you to speak after she gives her introduction and goes through her presentation. I'm telling you, it'll be well worth it, and you'll have ample time to ask all of your questions.
I've already gone through the presentation. It's right here in my hand.
We have not gone through satisfactorily. Based on open meeting, the select board does not have the luxury of talking and collaborating. So I would like to hear what my fellow board members, along with your fellow school committee members, have to say.
I'd
Thank you
still
very
prefer
much.
to answer have my questions answered.
With all due respect. Hannah, please proceed.
Okay. I'll wait for a minute for the presentation to come up. And I'm more than happy to, just make the comment that second slide is just a required boilerplate that all CLA presentations outside of our firm is required to have by our legal department. If you want to go on to the page 3, which is the agenda, and I'll just briefly go through this. I'm going to just do a brief introduction, and then we'll walk through. There are two different aspects to the allocation of costs, one being for as related to the town meeting budget, and then one as it relates to how costs are reported on the DESI end-of-year report, per their DESI's requirements. So if you want to go on to the fourth slide. So just as an introduction, when we start talking about costs being allocated between the municipal government and the school department, there's often a lot of confusion about what's related to the town meeting approval process, and then also how that fits in with the DESI reporting function. So those are two different, those could be handled in different ways. Those are two different topics. So I'm going to break it down to separate those out as we go through this. So first we're going to be talking, because I know right now the major issue is the budget that is being worked on actively. So we'll talk about it from the purely budgetary aspect and how we allocate the budgets for town meeting approval and how that governs the level of control that the school committee has. As you know, the town meeting will vote a top line budget for the school department. The school committee, within that amount, whatever that amount may be that's approved at town meeting, the school committee has the authority to determine how that is spent. And that's the budget that the school committee will be voting on. And then as far as the DESI reporting side of things, the reporting of the educational costs that are paid by either the municipal department budget or the joint cost budget, it doesn't matter which of those other two buckets it comes from. If it's part of DESI's required reporting, then it will get reported. So any changes we made there will not affect in any way the, how it gets reported to the DESI. We can go on and move to the next slide. And hopefully this isn't too terribly small. I know on my screen it's pretty small and difficult to read, but in essence, we were looking through the different kind of charges that are in the current municipal budget, not in the joint budget. These are costs that are sitting within the municipal budget, but that are in fact costs that are, services and costs that both the school district and the municipal government benefit from, and also a single department, looking at it for what really belongs in that joint bucket is, does any single department or one of the authorities really control that budget? So most of the costs sitting in that joint bucket are, health insurance, the debt service, costs like that really are difficult to control. It's not just one department's costs, those are spread across the whole town. And so in keeping with that methodology, the identified costs here are, the Munis software that is used by both the town and school is currently sitting in the town budget. We're asking that gets adjusted and moved into the joint bucket. The audit costs, once again, similar to Munis, those costs are currently in the municipal. We're asking them to be, and recommending they get moved into the joint bucket because there is that shared benefit. And then also there's specific school payroll benefit retiree costs that are once again being paid for currently out of the municipal bucket. Additionally, the school crossing guards and the school resource officers are currently being paid for out of the municipal budget within the police department under safety. And then there is currently a school Medicare consultant who actually reviews all the Medicare, all the costs that the school pays for certain students that are on IEPs that are reimbursable by Medicare. Currently, the cost to hire that consultant is paid for out of the municipal budget. However, we would like to move that to the joint one because there is once again, a joint benefit to that. What that Medicare consultant does, they actually will help to submit these reports, which then the more reports, the more funds that they can submit more. If they do a great job with it, that then turns around into Medicare money coming back to the town, which goes into general funds and then is there and available to be spent for any purposes within the general fund. And then finally, the regional school assessments. Now, this one really wasn't sitting in any particular bucket, but if you look on the kind of the details from some of the prior, when I looked at the 24 and 23 reports, it showed a total of, municipal budget, a total of the joint budget, and then total of the education budget. Within that education budget, there were two pieces. One of them being the school committee's budget for Stoughton Public Schools, and then the other being the regional school assessment. That was never part of the school committee's budget. It was just lumped in into this educational number. I think just for the strategically making it very clear that that's not part of the school committee's budget, that that's not part of the municipal budget, that it makes sense to shift that over and report that in that same section of the joint budget. Neither the municipality, the town, the manager's office, or the school district have any control over that. That is purely an assessment from the regional district based on how many students choose to go there. And so that one, it makes sense to shift that over and not include it in either the municipal or the education buckets. If we want to go to the next slide, what I did on the next slide basically is saying by those three buckets that we talk about, municipal, joint, and education, if we make these changes, what does that do if we were to do that for 2024? How would that have changed the look of your current budget? I didn't use 25 numbers because we don't have them all yet. Now, once again, I notated down here where it says educational bucket, that is made up of those two numbers, one of them being the school committee budget, and then one being that regional assessment. So when it says actually moving that 1.5 million over to joint, it's not moving it from the school committee budget. It's just shifting that regional assessment to be in a different, in high level going into that joint cost as opposed. So there's actually no adjustment at all to the school committee budget. It's just mostly a shift from the some of those direct school costs that were or shared costs that were within the municipal budget and moving those to the joint budget to better show it. Now, that being said, we're actually talking about moving that budget. We're not saying we're going to move the costs, but the municipality gets to keep the budget or vice versa. We're moving the cost, but the joint budget has to sustain it within its current budget. It would all go together. So in other words, your revised budget for the municipality would be lower than it currently is. The joint one would be higher. And then the educational budget would truly be the school committee budget. Hopefully that makes sense. And I think from this point, it gives more transparency into truly what in that municipal budget, what the municipal departments have true control over and what the school committee has real control over. And then, that joint bucket being the all other. If you want to go on to the next slide. So conversely, on the DESE reporting, do we want to take questions on that piece first before I move on to talk about how we report for DESE? Or should I go all the way to the end and then go back to questions? I'm happy to do it either way.
Good to do it now.
I'm sorry, I didn't have
Madam
my
Chair.
microphone on.
Madam
Yes.
Chair, there's two separate issues. One is the DESE reporting, the other is joint costs. Hannah's question is, do the two chairs wish, she just finished the joint cost portion, do the two chairs wish for her to take questions on joint costs before she talks about DESE reporting?
I would suggest that we take questions now on the joint costs, and I ask Madam Chair Weiss if she agrees or disagrees with that.
Yes.
Thank you very much. So we'll take questions. I will recognize
Well, I've got,
Vice Chair Cavey.
thank you very much. I do have a couple of questions. Let's see, the first one is a two-parter. So if we, let me just preface by saying that I don't feel a compulsion to make any sort of decision tonight. That's not what I'm about to recommend. But I do have questions about whether or not things are implemented tonight, what the effects are versus if we wait for some future time period. So this is really just for informational purposes, what impacts these might have in our current budget if we make decisions now. So the first one is if this is enacted now, will there be any impact to net school spending?
No. So the way, and that kind of does tie into my last section when I talk about the DESI reporting. None of these changes, it's purely just how you're relaying the budgets and where it shows up and how it's approved by town meeting. Overall, the spending is not changing. The budget in the total is not changing. It's just a kind of realignment of the budget to the buckets that make the most sense and have the most transparency for really, truly, what level of control those items have.
Sure. Thank you very much. The next question also, if these recommendations were enacted tonight, what impact would this have on our access to money from the levy? Specifically, do we have would there be any sort of additional money available if we enacted these changes in the current period versus if we did it in some future year?
No, it's basically the same answer that this is really just readjusting. There's no new budget. There's no reduction in budget. It's just realigning it to kind of these recommended, more transparent buckets to help people truly understand, who retains the control of these different costs.
Okay.
Vice Chair Cavey?
Just clarification, Madam Chair, on that same question.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, of course.
Hannah, could you explain to the members of the committee and the board what you explained to us? And I'm going to put it in layman terms, so I hope I don't mess it up. So if these expenses come out of the town budget to go into the joint costs, it does in fact decrease the expenses in the town budget, which would free up money to use in the school budget. I know the school has got great challenges right now, and if that frees up expenses that we don't need, we've got a 3.8% budget, it's balanced, it's baked, it's done. If that frees up, hypothetically, this amount of money in the town budget, doesn't that free up cash that the school could use in balancing their budget for next fiscal year?
Not exactly. Because it's not really freeing up money. It is freeing up money in your budget, but it's increasing the expenses and the budget on the joint cost.
Right.
So
Not in the school
overall,
budget.
there's actually no change.
I guess, let me ask you a different way then. It does not increase any expense in the school budget. I want to make that clear.
Correct.
But if it frees up money in our budget, which is money freed up under the levy, we don't need that money. Isn't that money available now for the school to use?
It's available under, it becomes available and used under the joint cost. So if it's a cost that, the joint costs are also paid for out of the tax levy. So if we move it out of the town's budget, it'll go into the joint costs budget to cover these costs. Now, we may have, and I think we had discussed this last week, we have some cost savings over in the joint budget due to some changes. For instance, the lack of the subsidy this year, right? So we may be able to, within that joint budget, to sustain these increases in costs, but to that bucket. But in the overall, in the grand scheme of things, just the realigning of it, at the end of the day, you have the same amount of costs coming out of your
I see. Thank you for clarifying that, and through you, Madam Chair, back to Mr. Cavey.
Okay. Well, I think another I'll go back to Vice Chair Cavey, but just to clarify, what we're saying is joint cost comes right off the top of all of our money, right?
Correct.
What we're saying also is the regional school assessment, that is, we get trued up for that, so it's just a pass-through for us. When I say
Yes.
us, the town of Stoughton, it's just a
Yes.
pass-through. Okay, okay.
So in essence, everything in that joint cost bucket, including if we shift the assessment into it, those are costs that are not really, to a certain extent, aren't controllable by a particular department. Those are really just costs that are, kind of over, if you think of it, in the non-governmental word, overhead costs that just have to be paid. And then those direct costs that are truly controllable at the departmental level, whether that be within the municipal departments or the school department, those are what would get allocated out to those, the municipal budget and the school budget.
Thank you. Vice Chair Cavey, sorry to interrupt
That's okay.
your question in the middle of your question.
Yeah,
But
so this one, the next question I have, which is also sort of a two-parter, is I just want to make sure that I understand some of what we're discussing before asking the next question. I think I do know it, but I'd rather just have somebody who has expertise confirm what I'm about to say. Since joint costs comes right off the top, is it accurate to say that, in a sense, neither the schools nor the town really contribute to it, as they don't receive like a bill or an expense where they're paying into joint costs? Instead, it is a separate set of accounts that is sort of isolated from both the school and the town, where we have joint some sort of joint liability in a sense. But my understanding is that comes right off the top, and then whatever's left over, the town and the school sort of have to make the case for their budgets using that money. Is that more or less accurate?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think that's a probably a good layman's way of explaining it, is that that joint cost, or those are the costs that we have to pay. Health insurance required by law, Medicare costs, pension, all those are all requirements that have to be paid. Those are typically, we don't have a lot of control of what those are going to be. We'll get estimates through, for the budget time to say this is what we think it's going to be, and we need a budget for that. And so, as last week we talked about the revenue projections, based on our revenue projections, if we first look at, okay, this is what that joint cost is going to be, we need to, like you said, pull that out first, and then how much do we have left for the the municipal budgets and the school district budgets, to try and present a balanced budget that is, fair to and provides the services that, the residents require.
Okay, and there are, I say this often, though, this is the first time we've met, so I'll say it to you and to anybody who's watching this meeting. I don't know much about how schools have to operate, and I don't go out of my way to learn it. We have a school committee it's their job, and so I have faith in them to make the right decisions and to follow the laws and all the things they need to do. But because I don't know a lot about it, when something comes up that I do need to know, I've got to ask a lot of questions. And one of them is, I know that there are certain expenses that the schools can't legally contribute to, things like regional schools. There's prohibitions against certain things that the schools they just can't put money towards. If that's the case, is there any impact by having these expenses moved into a set of expenses called joint costs that one might think that they're contributing to, and therefore would in fact be spending money on things that they're not legally able to? Or is that not really the right framework for how this sort of accounts works?
Yeah, the framework you're discussing, where there's the limitations on paying for certain costs, that's basically the school committee budget, right? So whether it sits in, and I will say that I work with a lot of communities. At any given time, I usually have about 60 active cities and towns within Massachusetts that my team is working with. Not all the communities have a separate budget between municipal and joint. Some of them, they basically have like a employee benefits, line item, and they don't necessarily split it up in this way. But always the school committee line budget, that is the one that is, the town meeting votes that budget as presented by the Board of Selectmen and recommended by the FinCom. That $1 line item, that is the school committee budget that then they can spend how they seem fit for the running of the schools, but that is the piece of the bucket that they can't pay for some of those other costs out of, such as the regional costs. So whether we put it in the bucket that you guys, how you allocate it between municipal and joint, that doesn't affect those requirements whatsoever.
Okay. I appreciate all these answers. I just want to make sure that, before moving forward on anything, I just want to make sure I really appreciate the impact this is having on other people. And certainly the school committee is important stakeholder in the town. And I've got kids in the school system. We've all had our kids go run through the school system, and we want to make sure that the schools are protected, against some surprise bills. But it sounds like that moving something from a town budget into a joint cost budget doesn't seem to have any impact at all to the school budget. Am I wrong about that?
Nope, you're correct.
Okay. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vice Chair Cavey, for those questions. Madam Wise, if you have questions, I would like to recognize you. If not, you could recognize Mr. Balboa.
Do you have a question? I'm going to recognize Ms. Francois Morissette.
We cannot, the microphone, please. Thank you.
Hi. I just have a couple of questions. I understand, based on what was said, that the joint cost doesn't really affect. It's almost like an allocation movement within the recording or reporting to DESI. I'm just interested in what the allocation looks like, the percentages that exist, who determines them, when are they allocated? Are we involved in that allocation at all? Or is it just basically we're going to move the funds over this year only, this current year, or are the allocation percentages going to change year over year? Like, what's the process, I guess I'm trying to understand.
Hannah, did you hear the question?
Yes, I could hear it. Yep. Yes, so I'll just repeat just to make sure I'm understanding the question. You're saying is how will this affect the allocation for the DESI reporting purposes, where we have set agreement and percentages that get allocated out. This is purely the discussion, this first part of this discussion we're having is purely just on the budget basis. We're not talking about yet my last two slides that we'll move to after these questions talks specifically about the DESI allocation methodology. So that's why I think there was an earlier question, does this affect net school spending at all? This does not. This doesn't have anything to do with how we allocate costs for the DESI end of year report. Purely just about showing these three buckets, how we're allocating between these three buckets of money for budgetary purposes.
So it says in the your presentation slides 100%. Can anybody hear me?
I'm sorry, it's just.
I was saying that in your presentation slide it says joint 100%, and I'm interested in knowing how does that break out, the 100%?
Well, I think that's just the intent of that is currently, we're just showing that currently, for instance, we'll use the audit fee. It's a requirement for both, GASB reporting, and then also you need to have the audit for, your bond raters, et cetera. It's required to have those audits. Currently, the entire audit fee, even though part of that audit, they're auditing all the departments, including the school, and they're also doing some specific auditing within that for school grants, and then possibly, I'm not sure if they have a separate agreement or not, but some roll in the end of year report audit into that same bucket as well. I don't know to that detail yet if that is how yours is, but in essence, currently 100% of that audit cost is within the municipal budget. We're just saying now that instead we're going to move that entire bucket for that cost into the joint cost. That 100%, it's basically just saying we're not trying to split it and saying, an alternative method could be, okay, well, 50% goes to the municipal budget, 50% goes to the school budget. Instead, we're saying, no, we're not going to try, because it could change from year to year what the true relationship of those type of costs could be. So instead, we're saying, no, let's just move the entire cost to the joint budget, because both municipal departments and the school department are receiving a benefit out of that.
I understand. Thank you for responding. I understand that. I think it's important for us to know the percentages as well.
So I think that's getting confused into what's going to be coming over in the DESE end of year reporting. So I think that answer we may answer that when we do those last two slides. If not, please feel free to circle back with the question again. But for the purpose is here, there's not a percentage allocation. It's just, we want to put the entire cost, because it is a joint, a shared cost, into that joint bucket. That has nothing to do with how much will be allocated to the school for the end of year report. That is a different discussion that will be on the next slides.
Dr. Bayetta, sorry, I'm going to get to you, Mr. Barbosa. Mr. Barbosa.
Yes, a point of clarification. And somehow it seems like simple math to me. If you have a joint account here, or joint shared expense, and you take some money from other expense and you put it here, that joint expense becomes higher. So there is an additional expense to the schools. And I believe the town manager is suggesting that there will be no additional expense to the school. I see that all the money does come for the taxpayer, but then we're at a point where, when we have a town meeting, who's going to ask for that money? Will it be the select board that's going to ask for the town, or would now the school committee will be forced to ask the taxpayer to put more money now because the joint cost is much higher for the school committee?
So the school committee doesn't have any input or control in that joint budget. That's a separate group. And so it does not impact, the school committee is not asking for any more money. It's moving it from one bucket to another, that neither of those are part of the school's requests. It's just realigning them into categories that make more sense and more transparency for whether it's a benefit to the municipal only, or the school only, or a joint benefit. It does not affect the school committee's ask for within their budget, because that is part of the joint budget, not the school's budget.
It doesn't affect the school committee's ask, but the school committee will have to ask because they're paying a bigger share of that shared cost. The school committee, the schools, when they need money, that's how it normally works. To my understanding, the school will come and ask through a warrant that we need money. But now the percentage of the amount being shared is bigger. Therefore, the school committee would have to go and ask for a bigger amount to share from the taxpayer, as opposed to the town asking for a bigger share from the taxpayer. Is that correct?
So I don't know how, if these are some specific ways of showing, the breakdown that Stoughton does, that I'm not familiar with. I wasn't part of the process last year, but my understanding is, and statutorily, the only ask and requirement that the school has is that bucket that the school committee is responsible for, which would be which would have no change with this. I understand what you're saying is that, yeah, it is joint costs, but at the same time, your budget, your direct budget will not be, this will have no effect in what the school committee, you can't reduce budget on one line item in your budget and adjust it for a line item in the joint budget. Those don't cross over. They're completely separate buckets. The town meeting gets to approve every one of those budgets as set forth by the Board of Selectmen and the FinCom's submittal to them. And then, they can adjust up or down any of those line items as they're going through the town meeting. But from what the school is asking for and what the school committee presents, typically of how I see, now unless you guys have something special, arrangement within Stoughton, but the standard is your presentation is purely just your school committee budget, and that's your request. But I think clarifying it this way, that these are those joint costs that there's very little control over for either municipality or the school committee, that helps the taxpayers to understand truly where are the areas that, there are increases, as most everyone knows, over the last 15 years, one of the massive increases from year to year is health insurance costs. That's not something that you can't go and say, well, I'm just going to, not pay health insurance costs anymore. You're required to. And so there's very little control that, anyone within, any one person within, or one department within the community has over that. So presenting it to the town as these are those costs that they're just required costs that we as a town, having employees, having buildings, for the debt service, the health insurance costs, anything like that, those are required costs. We can't do a lot about those. So we segregate those out, present those separately for them to approve, and then you can get into the nitty gritty of here's the school committee's request, here's the department's requests for, various services, and let the taxpayers make decisions from there.
Are you familiar with Stoughton's health issues last year, health insurance issues?
Yeah, the increased costs that happened.
And where did the money come from to pay that?
I was not part of the budget process for last year, so I had heard that, yes, you guys had some increases. As you were doing your tax recoup, there's also I think there were some new revenue sources that came in that helped offset those costs along with some others, but that, I was not at that time hired by Stoughton to take part in any of those discussions. So I would defer that to the town manager.
It would seem that
I wonder if we could stick to the joint discussion. We'll get to this later. I know that you have questions about this. I did have a question about the fact that the joint costs come off the top, correct? And so by increasing the joint costs by $2 million, that's $2 million more that comes off the top, correct?
Well, in reality, while it wasn't necessarily presented this way, the piece, the regional one, that was already coming off the top. It's just that in the reporting, when I looked at how it was laid out, it got lumped in then with education, but in reality, that was coming off the top. You don't have any control over that. The town doesn't have any control over that. That's a required payment. So that was already there. So if you back out that piece of it, there's not much of an adjustment. And in reality, it's even because it is then lowering the base amount of the school department, the town municipal budgets, then that does free up, that offsets that increase because you have the decrease on the municipal side. So it's not taking away funds from what the school has to offer, because the amount freed up on the municipal budget makes up for it.
Dr. Beda, question?
Yes, Dr. Bede.
Thank you, Joe Biada, Superintendent. Thank you, Hannah, for your presentation, and excuse my voice, I have a cold. So I was wondering two items. The first one is the Medicare issue, where that is the only line item that's also a revenue source. So I'm interested in the dynamics of creating an expense, but is also only the line item on here that actually brings in revenue, which the school department, as you know by regulation, does the work. It goes to the general fund. I think it's close to $3 million in the last 9 years. I remember as a town meeting rep in Stoughton many, many years ago, which tells you my age, where there was an article on town meeting floor that would pay this fee right off the top, if you will. In other words, as the money was coming in, it was taken care of. It was not considered a joint cost. So I guess historically, at some point, something changed, but that's the way it used to be done back in my days on the school committee and the town meeting rep. But my real question is, how does a joint cost account, how does an account become a joint cost when it has a revenue source that's coming in to the town general fund?
Yeah, and so some of this may kind of get into both maybe more accounting and statutory requirements than you may be interested in, but the cost that's associated with that right now, that is the cost to hire the consultant to prepare all of the requests for reimbursement that go over to the feds, and then at a later date you'll get a revenue that comes into general fund where they reimburse a certain portion of some of those costs. Per statute, that cost has to be separated from the revenue. You can't just hit the revenue account for that and just net them together. That's both an accounting requirement and also a DOR. And then secondary to that is that money that comes from Medicare or Medicaid, Medicare money that comes in from those costs, that is a revenue source for general fund, and by statute, general fund cannot, revenues are not earmarked for a specific purpose. They go into that general fund bucket, just like all the other, it actually goes into the local receipts bucket. So when you're looking at the revenue projections that we had put together, it's within that local receipts. It's considered what they call a miscellaneous recurring revenue source. And so that just, presents as a revenue source that then benefit, the higher that number is, then yes, the more funds that are available for general operating, whatever bucket that may be within there. But from statutorily, it's not earmarked for a specific purpose.
Madam Chair, through you, thank you for that. Can a topic be audit cost as a joint account and also be part of the DESE end of year pupil and financial report?
Yes, so it will be taken into account with that, but it won't be, like I said, the last two slides will talk about that. That is one of those, costs that DESE tells you to report on, and there's two different main allocation methodologies. So we're going to talk about that in those last two slides and what my recommendations are for there. But yes, that those audit costs are included, or a portion of them are included in the reporting to DESE per their regulations.
And then lastly, thank you. And then I will be quiet because I'm losing my voice. I'm not accustomed to seeing joint cost for regional school assessments. Just hasn't been part of my 15-year career of doing this. That said, I'm not suggesting it's the wrong one, it's just I haven't seen it done this way. And then second would be, where does Norfolk Aggie come into play? Because our educational budget is in fact a comprehensive budget that comes through Chapter 70 for both the Aggie, the regional VOC, and then us. Our town meeting votes a bottom number. I believe it's on Stoughton Schools and Transportation separately. And the other two just, if you will, walk right through because they don't even have to go to a hearing. So I'm wondering, and I understand the phrase transparency, but I worry, not only as superintendent, but as a former school committee member, that the school committee, which has no authority over the vocational school, could look to seem like it has some type of a say if it was under joint and not under municipality only.
But currently it's under education. So actually it's going the other way. Currently it looks like it is under the school committees because it's not part of the current municipal budget. It's being rolled up under that total bucket for education. But within that educational number, they're voting two separate lines, one for the assessments for the two different districts, and then one for the Stoughton Public Schools. So the school committee's always only ever had the control over that Stoughton Public Schools but it's the way that it's currently presented that the assessments are getting rolled up when they do a summary of here's the municipal, here's the joint, and then here's the educational. It's getting rolled up with that educational number. So it makes it, kind of exactly what you're talking about. You don't want to make it appear they have control over that. But that's what's happening right now, because currently it is being lumped in with that education, even though they don't have control over that bucket.
So if
So that was trying to right size that, as opposed to, so the two options is to move it to the joint or move it to the municipal. But having that separate joint and municipal helps to align the municipal government doesn't have control over that either. And so that's the idea of putting it in that joint bucket, because that's something neither have any control over. That's an assessment that we receive based on the students.
Madam Chair, is it okay to move back to the select board side
Anybody
for
else?
a few questions?
I think we're all good for now.
Okay. Either Mr. McCrisky or Vice Chair KV, you indicated you had questions. Who wanted to go first?
You can go. Joe, you go ahead. I've already spoken.
Okay. Well, I wanted to start on a personal note. I've been associated with this board on and off. I've had some terms in between, but 32 years. I can't believe that I can say that, 32 years that I've been here. And in my entire career as a sitting member of the Select Board and Board of Selectmen in the past, we had one meeting like this, one meeting where we got together jointly and tried to discuss the future and bring both sides of Pearl Street together. I personally would like to thank Dr. Baeta, and I say that when I say he's Joe Baeta to me, town meeting rep, school committee member, who we could differ but always have the outcome the same, is to work at the best interest of the town, and our town manager, Tom Coulter, for bringing these two boards together. This is the start of how we communicate together. There's a lot of new people here. I like new blood. I know some people would like to have new blood in this seat, which is great. I say run. But we're off to something that I think is groundbreaking. Let's try to keep moving forward. I think we've since had some substantive conversation right now, which is moving in the right direction. Are we going to make decisions tonight and answer questions, everything tonight? I don't think so, but we've begun the process of working together. This is what the people of this town need. This is what town meeting needs, so that when we get together, we speak jointly as both ends of government, the school committee and the select board, to do what's right for the taxpayers of this town. So with that, again, thank you, Dr. Baeta. Thank you, Joe, so much. Tom, thank you, and my colleagues both on the school committee. Thank you very much for being here, as well as my colleagues on the board. So just on Hannah, I just had a couple questions on, I believe it was page 8. Is the pupil reporting approach the best practice allowed by DESE?
So we haven't gotten to that page yet.
Okay.
You're ahead of the times.
Okay, well, that's what I'm saying. I'm looking at that, and I just had the question. So I'll wait until you say it's done and
Yep.
to answer that question. But I just wanted to make sure that I got that in, that's all.
Yep.
So, all right,
Yep,
so
absolutely. I'll cover that when I get to that page.
All righty.
Thank
I'm
you.
all set, I'll wait.
Okay. Vice Chair KV, did you?
Thanks. The last question I have, and I feel like once again, I feel like I already have the answer to this, but I just want to make sure I'm confirming this. One of the sort of a pet peeve of mine, I think I've siblings, so like I think it comes from my experience with siblings, is make sure that like in a sense, I'm not like ripping anything out of anybody's hands, not taking any sort of liberties with jurisdiction, and I'm very sensitive to that with regard to all the decisions that we make as a select board. I want to know, who actually has jurisdiction over these decisions, and I tend to use the what's called the racy paradigm, where you want to see who's responsible for something, who's accountable for it, who's involved with consultation with regard to it, and whose involvement is maybe more informational. And that's the paradigm I typically use. My understanding, which I'm looking for some affirmation on, is one, with regard to the town budget, it's pretty straightforward that the select board is responsible for that. With regard to the school budget, the school committee is responsible for that. Accountability probably is spread a little bit more broadly. We have a finance committee that's also accountable, a town meeting that has to vote these things, and that they're going to be accountable for these decisions as well, but we share some accountability there. Where it comes to joint costs, that's where I really want to just make sure that I'm sort of understanding where the jurisdiction lies, who actually has accountability, responsibility. I guess I feel like we all probably have some accountability for all of these accounts, but who actually has a responsibility to complete that budget, to oversee it, to ensure that it tracks year over year, that there aren't increases, major increases. And by calling it joint costs, there's a part of me that always assumed or thought that there was a shared and joint responsibility. But it seems like actually that's not entirely the case, that is, in fact, there isn't a responsibility to joint costs. It would sort of jurisdictionally from the school committee. Instead, that jurisdiction and really the responsibility of that budget comes from the select board. Am I understanding that part of this correctly?
So let me just kind of backtrack and just do a high-level overview of the responsibilities, right? So the select board is, through the town manager who makes a recommendation, and then the select board presents the town budget. They take the requests, from both the municipal departments and then also the request from the school committee. We have to bring that into one joint budget because we don't have separate revenue sources for each. It's all part of general operating. Balance that with what are the funds, what can we afford to do, and then and I'll say this goes along with the prior comments. When I worked with a lot of communities, the communities that I say that work with the school committee, the select board, the FinCom, that work together to try to really stay on the same page, not be adversarial, not us versus them type of mentality. Those are the successful communities, the ones that really take each other's, requests into, what's best for the community, as opposed to, everybody concerned about their piece of the pie, right? Yeah. Those are going to be the successful ones. So same thing, I commend that both the town and schools are willing to come together and try to work on this. We made that recommendation last week about doing a 5-year budget process, and I think having both the schools, the towns, all the various groups within Stoughton being part of that process will be incredibly important. It'll help to lead the future of the town. So from that standpoint, everybody has needs to work together to make it work. Statutorily, the ultimate, responsibility for putting together that budget and presenting it to town meeting is the select boards. Once that top line is of, each department, no matter what department it is. So say it's the police department, they're responsible for their budget and how it's spent within the police department. The school department is unique in that it's not that they have a department head who's in charge of it, but they have the school committee who then actively manages that. That being said, they don't have a direct control or responsibility for the joint costs. Neither do any of the individual departments on the town. However, there are certain things that indirectly, both municipal departments and the school can affect that. For instance, the health insurance that you discussed. If you add 30 FTEs into a department's budget, that's going to have an indirect impact, right, on that joint cost, because you might be only, the department adding those positions is only paying the direct cost of the positions, but then there's the pension costs related to those. There's the health insurance costs, the Medicare costs. All of those are then going to be impacted, even though they're, kind of lumped all together into that joint bucket. So, if you think about that joint cost bucket really being the one that you can indirectly affect, just like if you go out and build a new school or build a new fire station, the indirect piece of that is, yes, you guys made the choice to do that, but now those costs, once it's set, once you issue that debt, you're stuck with it. Those debt service costs would then roll into the joint cost bucket. Because it's kind of set already, there's very little you can do about it other than, say there was, if we were all lucky and interest rates went back down, you could refinance that debt to lower it. I'm sure everybody's looking to hopefully in the future that to happen again. But outside of that, there's not a lot you can do to those type of costs. So hopefully that clarifies it some, but ultimately it is the budget that is put forth by the Board of Selectmen with with then the input of all the departments and then the Finance Committee's, recommendation that goes to town meeting for votes.
So I appreciate the answer. Maybe the question might have come off as somehow adversarial, and I want to just make it clear that's exactly the opposite of my intention. That with regard to the way the schools in the town function to get collectively, we have some of the certain areas where we have conflict, and we have potentials for conflict, and those always frighten me because I think that we all have the same goals in mind, but the idea that somebody might do something you don't have a say in and sort of ram something down your throat is exactly the kinds of things we have to prevent from actually happening. So I appreciate your candor on that. I think that it's important that not that we know who gets to wield the sword here, but rather where do we have some areas where we have some joint interests, but the structures of responsibility are such that you're kind of asking for there to be conflict if you start meddling too much. For that reason, I think it's important that for whatever it might be worth to the other members of the select board and members of the school committee, that this is any change, even if technically it has no impact on the schools and never will. I think it's important that we really have a chance to all digest this and just go back and think about this for some amount of time before we try to make any decision tonight. And that's my recommendation to us. I would be interested in having more time to think through the consequences of any sort of change to make sure that everyone, all the stakeholders, agree with it, understand it, and see the wisdom in it before we make any changes. So I won't make a motion right now, but I do think it's important that we perhaps just take in all the information, think it through, and maybe come back around at some other point to decide if there's any changes that we want to make. Thank you very much. And before I hop off, I just want to also thank all the members of the school committee for joining us, Dr. Baeta, Mr. Colantonio, and there's actually one other person whose name I don't know at the very end, which I think, if you don't mind. What was that?
Heidi Perkins.
Heidi, I don't think I've met you yet, and thank you so much for joining us and helping us gain your perspective as well. Thank you.
So is that a motion, Steve?
Before you make that motion, Vice Chair Cavey, I would like to agree with you by saying this is an information session, and I think we actually need to, for all of us to decide what would be the process, the oversight process for the joint costs. We need to be able to feel comfortable and reconcile, like, how did they develop that 112,300 number? Is that right, and come to agreement? So we don't have a process, even if we did vote on it tonight. And we should have a process before we concur. So I agree with that. And before I move on, I would like to, before Mr. Gito, I would like to recognize Chairwoman Madam Weiss, because you had a comment,
Yes.
and I saw.
Thank you. I think Dr. Baeta had the same kind of question, but also we feel that it would be very beneficial to have maybe some sort of working group, perhaps the chair and the vice chair of each committee, to come together, maybe in the summer, outside of the pressure of the budget season, when it doesn't feel like we're being pushed to do this right now because everything will fall apart. But I think if we have that sort of thing, and we can also talk about the long-term capital goals. We have a building that we are looking to build. We have others that are going to come in down the pipeline. Certainly we need to have a discussion together. What are the long-term plans for the town? Because for us, it's really important to figure out what is the problem we're trying to solve with this. Are we doing this just to do this, or is there an actual benefit? Is there an actual problem we're solving? Is there an actual goal we're working towards? And to us, that feels much more, efficient to kind of think about this in a larger context, perhaps a working group later in the year, especially for our purposes, because we're such a young committee. We need to go through the budget process. We need to understand our budget. We need to understand all of our funding sources, even though some of them are going away this year, what that means for us long-term as well.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Also, Mr. Gito, you had a comment, and that's before we go on to the next section of the presentation. Just Dr. Baeta. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Mr. Gito, thank you. I think it's really, really important to my boss's comments, the chairwoman. I think it's really, really important that we get into the weeds with this. And what I mean by that is, many of us in this room have been around here for a long time, and the issue of health care last year really threw a curveball at the community, if you will, the employees, the town, so on. But one of the things I also want to get into is, after 15 years of doing this in numerous communities, I don't see too many town meetings having to find funds to secure health care because there were too many employees hired or not hired, and so on and so forth. In other words, it's a constant changing number within that number. And so if we know that we can afford only 20 new employees over the next 2 years, as an example, that would be something the working group could be working on, because it has such a significant financial impact of over $22,000 per, if not higher. The second part is, in my last district, when we talked about things like school resource officers and crossing guards and all that, we actually got down to a comment that's in here from your consultant, which is, what does that actually look like in terms of time spent X versus Y? And I think only a subgroup of the chair, the vice chair, or your designees that you decide to, over a period of time, could really come to some type of fruition and an end result of some type of agreement going forward. We also have, and I know we're going to this next, we also have the end-of-year report agreement on percentages that hasn't been signed since 2010 by the chair of the select board and the school committee. That needs to be looked at as well. So just two critical comments. Thank you, Mr. Gito.
Thank you very much. Now I'll turn it to Ms. Hannah and to complete her presentation, and then we'll come back to Mr. Gito had a question.
Jesus.
Okay. You want to bring back up the slides, and we'll go to the, I want to say it's slide number 7, but wait till it gets up.
What is happening now?
We're going to review of the presentation pages 7 and 8. It has to do with DESE and
I have a question about the part that we just finished. So could I have my questions answered?
is there any way we could do it at the end, Mr.
No.
Gito? Well,
We can do it right now.
excuse me,
because
I
recognize-
noticed a little attitude, and you're the only one that
do.
had a little attitude.
I do.
Mr. Gito, I think that's very disrespectful, and as a role model for the town, I really think it's disrespectful.
That's just fine.
Thank you.
But I would
say,
recognize-
Hannah, please proceed with
Thank you,
page
Fran.
7 and 8 of your presentation.
Okay, is it shared on the screen again? Yes. Okay. Okay, so moving on from the discussion about how, the budget is presented before town meeting, I put some informational items on here, but DESE, in essence, part of their regulations require that you report expenditures that are from local revenues, so in other words, your local receipts, your tax levy, your cherry sheets, all, your general fund sources that are spent by the municipal department and other than the school committee expenditures. So those get reported on the end of year report. That is, the traditional is September 30th is the due date. They often extend it. But in essence, those get reported each year, and the categories and the various allocation methods that the when it says the department here in this, because I copied exactly their language, that is the education department for the state. So that's DESE. That's not the school department or the town department. That's DESE themselves. So they lay out the categories and the costs that are eligible to be reported on end of year report. That being said, some of those costs that they want you to report do not affect net school spending. So there's some costs, and just like within the school committee's budget, there are some costs that the school committee is required to spend that don't actually help your net school spending. They don't get taken into account. So what I did on the left side of this is a breakdown of all the costs paid for that, if they are paid for by the town, will get allocated into will get reported on the end of year report. There's a separate section for town paid expenses. Those all get laid out there. So on the left of the chart, you have the ones that do actually affect net school spending. If they go up or down, it will increase or decrease your net school spending. The items on the right are the ones that have no effect whatsoever on net school spending. So for example, the school crossing guards that we discussed. It doesn't matter what bucket of money that got paid out of, even if they're school employees, whether it's within the municipal department, the joint budget, or in the school's budgets, crossing guards do not count towards net school spending requirements. Other ones like transportation, that's usually a very large piece of the school's budget, especially with the special ed students. That can be a very costly piece. Unfortunately, it does not go against your net school spending because those are not direct, not as direct costs of the education of the student. On the left, though, some of the more traditional ones, and I think where you're getting into the percentage breakdown and split, is most of the costs that we've talked about falls into that first category, which is your administration services. Within that is going to be like the percentages. I looked at how you've done it in the past. I understand you don't have a signed agreement right now since 2010, but the past practice of how it's been done has been a set percentage of, say, the finance costs, the treasurer's costs, the allocation of the audit costs, it's kind of broken down to all this little nitty-gritty detail. That is an option for how you report it. But if you move on to the next slide, we can go back to the slide if there are other questions about any of the other types of costs. But if you go to the next slide, really in looking at how you have historically allocated it, I think you guys have done a great job of recognizing and reporting the costs that are paid for by the town and out of the budget. The only area I think I would recommend any changes on is in the way that your current administrative costs are reported. Currently, it's a very detailed breakdown, about 10 different categories, varying percents. And as you said, you don't have a current agreement. There may be arguments, like one person might say, I want 25% of that person, another one 30%. And so one of the reasons why DESE came up with a separate way to do it, and many of the communities I work with, most everyone is moving towards this way because it's standardized. It standardizes it across all districts, and it makes it a more equivalent look when you're comparing one district to another, right? But basically what DESE did was they came up with an average cost, and they come up with a new average. It doesn't change a lot from year to year, very slight adjustments year to year. But they come up with a standard average that they post on the end of year report webpage, per pupil cost of what the typical what administrative costs are. So for instance, I just used FY23 as an example. For instance, And I think at the time I pulled this, the actual allocation wasn't quite done yet. But typically you have around $250,000 in administrative costs with all those different pieces that fall into it. Like I said, there's 10 different line items. Each one you kind of have to make different justifications for the amount that is. If you were to use, that's actually quite low for administrative costs. And there's probably some costs that are not being included that could be. So DESE allows you to just use this standard one. You just take that number for 2023, it was $141.28 per student. And so then you look at the number of students. I just pulled this off of DESE's site for 2023 of what the set number of students are in the district at that time was 3,686. You just multiply those two numbers together, you get approximately $521,000 of administrative costs. That then gets, it doesn't mean you're actually, there's no cash changing hands, there's no budget being adjusted. All that is just how you're reporting it, as opposed to trying to, strip out all these little pieces from every little area within the administration of the community. It's doing just this standard rate, similar to how the feds have a standard reimbursement rate for mileage, right? DESE comes up with this number, and using it helps to level the playing field from one school district to a next, because everybody's then using the same kind of level of that, as opposed to some people using one percentage methodology and other, everyone might do it a little different. And I think it also will help to be able to have everyone kind of come to agreement of this is what our standard costs to be allocated are, and having that signed, having a signed agreement is a requirement of DESE. So basically for 13 years, you haven't been meeting that requirement. And I'm guessing it's probably showing up in your end of year report management letter that you get from your auditors because it's not signed. So I think it is important for these groups to come together, and I'm happy to help take part in any of the discussions, but to talk about like how we can come together with a written agreement signed off on that, of that methodology, and using that in the standard rate that DESE provides, it streamlines the process a lot. Because the rest of the costs are pretty straightforward. Like you can allocate your debt service costs to them. Well, that's easy, straightforward. You look at what debt are you paying on for school buildings, for school equipment. Those are all pretty straightforward costs. It's not the costs that fall into that administrative bucket are more, how's the word to say, more subject to more differences in people's opinions on, what the true percentage should be, which once again, that's why DESE came up with this alternative approach. But it doesn't actually affect your budgets. This is a completely just a reporting only, issue. It doesn't affect the budgets, doesn't affect actual costs going out the door or spending. It's just for the reporting purposes. So I will stop at that. So if there are any questions on the DESE reporting function.
Thank you very much, Hannah. At this time, and looking at the time, we want to be respectful, but are you prepared to answer questions on any part of your presentation, the first section or 1 through 8?
Yes,
are you prepared?
absolutely.
With that said, I'll defer to Mr. Gito for any questions on the total package
The
presentation.
question is not a difficult question. It's very mundane, I suppose. The only 2 line items that I see that have personnel associated with them are the crossing guards and the police. Is that true? Are there any other personnel costs in the joint costs?
No, you are correct. The crossing guards and the school resource officers, those are payroll costs. The rest of them are expenditures.
Are what?
Expenditures, non-payroll costs. So yes, the only personnel is within those 2 buckets that you
Thank you.
identified.
Just for clarification, Hannah, on this third bucket down on page 5, I'm sorry, Madam Chair. I
Yes.
apologize.
I understood.
Thank you. The third line does say school payroll benefits retirees. I believe that's a potential position that the town manager is looking at, so I just want to make sure that for factual information, that would be in there as well.
So, yes, yeah, you're accurate. There currently isn't any payroll costs associated with that, but yes, I think there is a possibility of having a payroll person who is specific to assisting just the school department.
Madam Chair.
Madam Chair.
Thank you. Point of clarification, the 2010 Schedule 19 agreement is indeed signed. So we do have a signed agreement that we've been operating with since 2010.
Okay. It just hasn't been updated or changed, is what you guys were referring to before.
That's correct.
Vice Chair Cavey, I saw your hand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, a quick question. It sounds like, once again, like this doesn't have any sort of budget impact. However, it is a reporting requirement from DESE. How exactly does DESE use this information? Is there a compliance component to this where we have to meet some sort of requirement and like this would have an impact on that? How does this actually impact I guess the town, schools, and why does DESE need this information? And how do they use it?
That's a great question. And DESE would love to tell you that it's not them, don't blame them. I will just say I have great respect for anyone in the schools who's ever been part of preparing the end of year report. I did 4 of them this year for different clients. That report is a beast. And I'm sure if the person who prepares it for Stoughton is in the room, they are probably nodding emphatically. That report, actually, most of it is a requirement. Most of the detail level that they're requesting, the information they're requesting, a lot of that is a mandate by the feds. And some of those costs and information that roll up in there is used in determining your entitlement grants. So some of it is DESE kind of requirement, especially towards the net school spending calculation, but then other pieces of it are requirements that DESE then has to turn over. DESE collects all this information from all the schools, and then they have to do their own reporting to the feds related to the entitlement grants that DESE manages for them and does pass-throughs for it. So there's kind of 2 pieces to it. DESE does gather all that information, and they have a lot of data banks out there that many districts will use, and you can go and look and do like comparative, I think they call it like market basket analysis between school districts, who's spending what's the per pupil cost for the instructional costs versus administrative costs versus, other buckets within there. And so a lot of it is filtered into that data analytics. And so the more consistency, and that's part of the reason for the very in-depth DESE function codes and how it's all laid out, is that it helps them to compare, and possibly even look at like, okay, where's a school that may need some additional assistance, or, that things might be getting reported incorrectly. And so they do, the auditors look at it, and it's called an audit of the end of year report, but it's not really, it's what they call an agreed upon procedures, because there's accounting statutory requirements for what's called an audit. But in essence, the auditors come in and review it and compare it to what DESE has asked them to look for errors on it. So the reporting gets lumped into there, but the important piece, I think, where this can affect communities, and depending on where you're currently sitting with your net school spending, is that net school spending calculation. So those costs that are applicable towards net school spending, which administrative costs are, say if you're a community that is just barely making net school spending or missing net school spending, having that change in structure and having more of a kind of levelized comparative to other districts number that's being used every year, that can help to smooth, I guess, the curve of where you're at on your net school spending. And, if it benefited them, for instance, on here where the net school, the per pupil cost would actually be reporting more costs towards net school spending. Let's say Stoughton was 250,000 short of net school spending. This would make up that gap, and you would no longer be short on net school spending. But if you're currently, say, beating net school spending by $1 million, in essence, you're already beating net school spending, so there's no necessary impact, but now you're beating net school spending by more. So you can look at it that you guys are, you're not only meeting, but exceeding by a certain amount what the minimum requirement, and net school spending is the minimum requirement of what the state says you need to spend to, to pay for the students that are within your care. So I guess hopefully that answers your question. If it doesn't, I can try and clarify.
No, I appreciate that. It's getting me right into the right ballpark. My own background is in corporate taxes, and I know that there's a lot of different methodologies for dealing with certain accounting, and the fact that you have different methodologies doesn't imply or shouldn't be understood as you doing anything nefarious or trying to pad anything or do anything. You pick a methodology based on the advantages it might give you at some point, and then you just more or less have to stick with that, and not change it year to year, depending on how you want the year to go. So I'm not against the idea of changing methodologies. I want to make sure that a change in this methodology doesn't sort of negatively impact something like Chapter 70 funding for the town. If it's advantageous to have this number be a little bit larger, if we go with this separate methodology, and that prevents us from being penalized for not reaching that net school spending limit, and that's helpful to know. I just wanted to know, where are the benefits to us, and where are some of the potential risks in changing this methodology.
Yeah, and I think the benefit is the consistency and the consistency with other districts as well, because many of them are moving this way. Additionally, it's just less complicated to try and come up with that number, of what all those different pieces are. I looked at the current calculation. There's a lot of different areas within there. And, if you wanted to go back and revisit the current allocation method, there's a lot of room for, different opinions on what exactly those set percentages are, which is why, once again, DESE came up with that method. And many of the communities are choosing to go with it because it's much more efficient as far as making the calculation, and it creates a consistency across the state when you're comparing one district to another.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Hannah. Thank you very much, Vice Chair Cavey. In our closing for this section of our meeting, I asked my fellow board members and Madam Chair and the school committee and Dr. Baeta if there are any other questions before we close. If I know Vice Chair Cavey was in the midst of making a motion, seeing that this is just an informational session, did you still want to move forward with a motion on either side, school side or what have you? I just wanted to give that opportunity. So thank you very much. I see for questions. Oh, Mr. McCrisky, you had a question.
Just going back to my question on earlier on the methodology. Is this, the best practice, that we follow, by DESE? I mean, it's, again, I'm not here and I don't know everything about the school budget, but we're here to try to do what's best for the community. And if the town side needs to make some changes to account in a similar process that you're doing, does it make sense? Is this the best thing for the town of Stoughton to do? Does it, if it makes sense, I think it would make sense if it's good for us, no matter what the best practice is. But is this what other communities do? Is this a proven best practice for us?
I mean, in my opinion, there's others may have different opinions, but I do think that this is the best practice. This would be my recommendation to move towards that because it does create that consistency. DESE provides you the number every year, and it gives greater consistency across school districts, because many of them are using that same methodology.
Okay. All
Thank you. I'm looking around for the other select board members, and I see Madam Chair.
Questions from my committee? Yes, Ms. Morrison.
Thank you. Hi. To piggyback off of Vice Chair KV's question, touching upon the compliance issue, I'm just interested in knowing, seeing that we don't have an agreement since 2010, that's probably, what, 13 years now? Have we, since we've not been relatively in compliant with the regulations or the requirements of DESE, has there been any kind of like violations, penalties associated with that? Understanding that we're trying to potentially change the methodology that we're following as well, is there any consequences if we go with one methodology compared to the other, as well as in the past 13 years, has, for us not to be in compliant, has that affected our entitlement? Does anybody know?
So I think I could ask that. Somebody else had clarified for that. 2010, I believe, was the last year you revised it, and when it was signed, and in essence, it hasn't been changed since then, but it's still in place until you come and create and do a new one that's basically replaces it. So I believe you are in compliance because you do have a written one. It's just a very old one that hasn't been reviewed again for current practices, current recommendations. So I think from that standpoint, and let's just say you didn't have a signed one, even from back in 2010, there isn't necessarily a impact as far as they're not going to withhold state aid, funds like that. It's typically what it'll do. They really want you to have a signed agreement because they want the towns and they want the school departments to work together and and have a consistent method of reporting these costs. So they want you to do it, which is why they say it's a requirement. The real impact will be it's a comment on your management letter saying that you don't have it. Kind of ends there, and especially if that's some communities I know that have that. It's a comment they have it every year because they haven't been able to reach an agreement between the municipality and the school, but it's not impacting funds they're getting. It's not impacting grants or state aid in any way. It's purely a comment on their management letter.
Thank you, Dr. Beata. Oh, Cheryl, Madam.
Ms. Shannon, yes.
Hi, thank you so much for the presentation, Hannah. I really appreciate it. I wonder if, given your expertise with different communities across the Commonwealth, if there are one or two other communities who really nail this in terms of collaboration between the town government and the school government to kind of move forward together that we might want to look at when we look at things like the recommendations that you're making in this report in terms of how to balance the joint costs and administrative costs?
Yeah, and that's a great point. And I actually have pulled from, as I was working on this, I pulled from several other clients that we've worked with on these processes. I would say, if you did set up kind of a working group, I could, prior to kind of sharing some of that information from other clients, I could request, just permission from them to allow me to give their more detailed or give contact information if you so wished. I would just feel better about asking for permission for that before providing you with some names. But I'm more than happy to reach out to various clients and request that.
That would be awesome. Thank you.
Yes.
I have one more question. Is it possible to loop the Finance Committee in on this? I think this is a really important discussion to have without them. I feel very concerned that, they're not here tonight, but if we do have a working group, I would like to see participation for the Finance Committee on that, because I think it's really important that if this is about the town and the future of the town, that we include them on that discussion.
Before I answer that question, I hear Vice Chair KV, you were going to make a comment?
Yeah, just simply through you, Madam Chair. I agree with that sort of premise. I think that I did want to make a motion tonight, but I think it's probably premature. Instead, it would be good to, Madam Chair Weiss, I'd love to be able to work with you perhaps and formulate a motion that we can both bring to our separate boards for a vote of what this committee might function, how they would operate, what their charge would be, what the timelines would be for their work, bring it to our separate boards. There might be amendments then. We could sort of redraft things, maybe have a couple of votes, and make sure that we're all in agreement. And I think if you and I are working together, the idea of including the Finance Committee would be something we probably want to throw out there, discuss, and see if that works or doesn't work. So rather than making a motion tonight, I would like just to make the commitment that I will work with Chairman Weiss to come up with a recommendation that we'll bring to our separate boards, and that we'll vote on at that point.
Is that in agreement with you? I
Yes.
see a lot of head nodding, the affirmative, yes, sounds good to me as well. Thank you. Mr. McCrisky, did you have a final comment? Or?
Yeah, I did. Just with this mentioning that the operating agreement we're working on is from 2010. Well, budgeting has changed. Finances have changed. COVID has changed. People have changed. Department heads have changed. You know, and this was discussed briefly. My colleague, Mr. Gito, a few meetings ago, talked about this subject of joint cost and Chapter 70 funds and all that stuff. And now we're getting together, so that we can talk about what is best for the entire community. And I think there is the best approach. Everybody that's involved with the process should have a seat at the table in that process. This way here, we're working for the good of this entire community. It's not about politics. It's about coming here, getting a solution that works for the two biggest agencies in town government right here, is the school department and the select board. And we all have an obligation to the people, and it's the same people that vote for us to put us in office and to judge us on what we're doing. And I just think this is a fabulous first step, and some of the talk that we're going to do moving forward, I'm hoping that we're going to get some great things done from it. So, Mr. Town Manager, thank you. Dr. Bayeda, thank you. Madam Chairs, the two chairs, thank you very much for what you've done to bring this meeting together.
And thank you too, Hannah. Thank you very much. So with that, we'll close this section of our select board meeting. Did you need to adjourn your meeting?
School committee, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right, the motion was made by Ms. Francois Morissette. Do I have a second? The motion was seconded by Ms. Shannon. Roll call vote. Mr. Barbosa? Ms. Shannon? Ms. Francois Morissette?
Aye.
And myself, aye. This school committee portion has been adjourned.
Thank you very much, and we're going to take a 5-minute recess for transition. Our next agenda item is continuation of public hearing. Thank you very much. We will reconvene in 5 minutes. Thank you. We call the Select Board meeting back to order at 7:51 p.m. Yes, I'm sure. This section of our agenda is a continuation of the public hearing. A vote was made on November 21st to continue the public hearing until today. To hear and consider a notice of intent to sell and right of first refusal. We would have Mr. Tisdale, Mr. Roth, Ms. Shropshire, Mr. Lyman, and Mr. McDonald, and there may be others that are not listed. So who's Linehan? Okay. So who's going to start off? Is that Mr. Tisdale? Are you giving the introduction, or first right of refusal?
Thank you. Just an overview of what this process entails. The town manager asked several departments to comment on their opinions on the acquisition, to react to the act of first refusal for this piece of property, and if they were in favor and not in favor of acquiring this piece of property. The three boards are the Planning Board, the Conservation Commission, and the Open Space Committee. with me. To the right is the chair of the Open Space Committee, John Linehan. Since he's here, I believe Bill is online. He can go next. And I'm not quite sure if Jerry McDonald, the chair of the Conservation Commission, is online. He said he would be, but I don't see him present. I will try to reach out to him in the meantime. Just a side note from my thoughts on this, generally speaking, there's options the town may have. You can certainly purchase the property straight out. You can refuse, let a developer do what they're going to do with the property. I did have a lengthy discussion with Mr. Gito the other day about other options that are in place through the town that we have at our hand now, things such as flexible developments. A developer would have to come into the town, prove they could put a subdivision road in. They can probably get 20 house lots. The planning board at that point in time would have the option of waiving the dead end length of requirement road in the town to allow the 20 lots, or they can negotiate with the developer saying, listen, we'll allow you to get the 20 lots for planning purposes, but we're going to only waive that requirement if you go through the flexible development stage. What that means is essentially the road gets half the length or a third of the length. Out of the, whatever, 40 acres of land, only maybe 20 acres gets developed, the other 20 get restricted, and that could go in the care, custody, and control of the Conservation Commission. Those are all options at the town's hands through the various boards and committees also, so that's sort of like a compromise. If you found yourself stuck one way or another, the town still has teeth in this afterwards when the developer comes forward. And with that said, I'll hand it over to John.
Okay, I think my role is to... I'm sorry. John Linehan, I'm chair of the Open Space Committee and a member of the CPC and a town meeting member. This is a great piece of property, and in its current state and in its natural state, it would be a great asset. It abuts Ames Pond, a wonderful recreational resource potentially, and other sources. You probably read my notes that I submitted earlier for the prior hearing, but it's not inexpensive to do this right of first refusal, and I also serve on the as a representative of the Open Space Committee on the Community Preservation Committee, and I know we're feeling pressed for money these days. There are a lot of things coming at us, a lot of high expense items, and so I don't think I can't speak for the CPC, but I know just as an overall observation, we are feeling pressed for available funds. So I was, as Mark said, there may be other creative solutions. I did read in some of the background literature, I think something that came from the purchaser's attorney, that he wanted to keep it in a natural state as opposed to develop it. And I don't know if that's true. That didn't come from the purchaser themselves. That was from their attorney. And if something could be worked out where perhaps we purchase a conservation easement or something like that, if in fact that is a possibility, that would be I would assume, be a far more palatable, financially way to approach this. But it's a great piece of property. I think that's what I really want to get across. And there are a variety of potentials for it, but not inexpensive. And I think we all realize that. So as you know, the Open Space Committee did vote unanimously to express their interest in acquiring it for the town for open space purposes. But that's easy to say and not have the money behind it. So this is a tough decision. This is a unique, it's part of what's disappearing in Stoughton right now. And so I would love to have you guys say yes. I think we'll have challenges getting it through even the CPC and town meeting, but great piece of property and be ashamed to lose it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Linehan. Mr. Roth, did you have comments?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Bill Roth, Town Planner. The Planning Board met on December 14th, and they voted unanimously to recommend to the Select Board to not exercise the right of first refusal. So, they reviewed the matter and they voted not to exercise the right of first refusal. Just to echo what Mr. Tisdale said, our existing zoning bylaws allow us the flexibility, especially with the flexible development, to, they can only get the amount of density that a conventional subdivision, and then you can then, make the lots compact. There's a open space requirement for flexible development, and it's not in the code. It does not, it's not just dedicating all of the wetlands and developing the uplands. It is upland and wetland that would be required. So it's a fairly detailed process, and I think that, just to echo what Mr. Tisdale said, that there is, viable options to look at preserving through a flexible development the same number of lots, much more compact versus the acre-and-a-half lots, half-acre lots, or whatnot, and then looking at providing that open space and where it is and dictating where it is. So with that, I'm here to answer any questions.
I don't see any hands raised at this time. Move right along is Mr. McDonald. This is Jerry McDonald. He did write us a letter, but anyway, I see Mr. Tisdale.
I did just have a text message chain with Mr. McDonald. Fortunately, he could not come tonight, but he did refer you to the letter in your packet. His commission did unanimously vote in favor of purchasing this parcel.
And then Mrs. Trish, did she send us a letter? Did you want to address that, Mr. Coulter?
Sorry, Mr. Coulter, can you use your microphone?
Thank you, sir. It's from the Board of Assessors regarding the West Street properties, and she names the assessor parcels and their intent to sell and our right of first refusal. The Board of Assessors have been provided copies of a notice by email of the intent to sell the above referenced property. The Board of Assessors has reviewed the notice and have decided to recommend to the Select Board to waive their first right of refusal, as they do not feel the entity is valuable to town use. I'm reading it as written. However, as stated in the notice, the new owners intend to keep it in the same recreational use. The assessors recommend they sign an affidavit promising to convert or develop the land, as this sale will not be subject to penalty or rollback taxes unless the use is not changed. I don't know if that's helpful, but that is the letter from the assessors.
Okay. I'll open it up to the Select Board if they have any questions. Yes, Mr. Carrara.
Through you, Madam Chairman, to who can answer this. John, remember when we did Trust for Public Land?
Yeah.
Is that a viable option too, or is that
It doesn't seem it. We had investigated it for another parcel, and it seems that what they said at the time, and this was several years ago, I'd say, Scott, they turned their sites onto real urban spaces.
Somebody says that, and I don't know if it's true, that AD Makepeace is not just focusing on cranberry bogs, that they'd be willing to expand into areas like that if there's like viable land or something. I don't know how true that is. I didn't know if it's something we can check into.
Sure, it's worth a shot. But I
But
think
Bill Roth is talking, like Mark said, they're talking cluster. And I'm not a big fan of cluster development, jamming in as much as you can in a smaller area, because we don't want to run the roads out in through the wetlands and do crossings and dead ends and stuff. It's just, if it can't be built the right way, then I don't think it should be built the wrong way. And I don't want to see another roadway go in like Goddard Highlands is going in, that those people got to have private trash. They're fixing their own roads because they're putting in Mark's terms and my terms, they're not using ductile iron pipe, they're using plastic. So there's a lot of downside to the infrastructure when you cluster. So, and I don't know who's going to pick up and have a picnic in, if you bought a house, your backyard, just because it's designated as, land that is for the town, it just turns into leaf dumping grounds.
I agree with you.
Any other select board comments or, Mr. McCrisky?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This has been discussed in a couple times, different forums, and I've had people give me a call. I've run into people at the coffee shop, sit down and talk about the issue. But, what concerns me is that, as we know, this property is listed at 3.8, and I'm going to refer to my notes. And I apologize, I'm not making eye contact. But, while we consider this, we have to understand $3.8 million. And we all know that, as of November 6th town meeting, we found out that our debt ceiling is $259,378,000. All right, the debt outstanding is $111,808,000. Therefore, our borrowing capacity of $147,550 as of November 2023. So we know the town has a 4-year capital plan, and by calculating estimating costs only for 6 projects that we know that are out there, we're going to exceed our borrowing capacity, $32,450,000. Now, I'm glad that somebody walked me through these numbers. All right, we know that we have an active conversation right now. The South School, $75 million. Fire station, $27 million. We have updates to the police department, $20 million. Road and underground infrastructure, we know the water and sewer pipes. It has been documented over the years, $25 million. A transfer station has been discussed, $3 million. Estimated project cost, $180 million. Borrowing capacity, $147,550. Now, I agree that it would be great to have a piece of property like this, but I don't feel it's a responsible move by this board to vote to exercise the right for $3.8 million where we don't know where it's coming from. And Mr. Linehan, you just said that, the funding sources are starting to dry up. So if there's something that we can do working with if it becomes a developer, let's hope that somebody wants to put a camp down there or something like that. But, let's face reality. When they look at a piece of property like this, we know they're thinking housing. But if we can limit that by trying to work with them, as Mr. Roth mentioned and Mr. Tisdale, maybe we could still benefit from, working with them to get that access possibly for free, with right-of-way rights and easements and so forth. So, I mean, again, it's just where do we pay for it from? So I won't be supporting this. I just think it would be irresponsible for me with the rates that we've increased this year with water and sewer and trash to go to the residents and say, we're going to borrow something, to build and to buy something we really don't know what to do with. We've had members of this board in just 2 subsequent meetings, I shouldn't say subsequent, but past meetings where they say, what's your plan for it? We don't have a plan, but we'll go out and spend $3.8 million? I mean, we've had other issues where we've taken on, and there were projected goals of timeframes that we just blew out of the water completely. You know, and some are still out there that haven't even been done that we voted in the past. So I just feel uncomfortable right now to support something like this with the position that we have for the town's needs, the school's needs. I just don't see this as a priority. You know, and I don't want to get those calls that say, oh, you never support the environment. I love the environment. Without a doubt, I sit by the ocean more than anybody will ever know. You may not see me walking in the trails in the woods, but, you know, I've got my areas where I go to get my peace of mind, believe me. But these numbers here really are just, to me, self-explanatory. I mean, what do we choose? You know, and if we could come up and, hey, there was a grant that we can, and that's when Scott said that, the thought went through my head is, you know, to what other agencies are out there that would be able to help us in something like this? You know, and that's what we said the CPC was for. I don't know if it's a possibility if CPC came up with partial funds, if there's another grant out there, but we were going for a grant, you know, recently, and, you know, it was like we were sitting on the platform of our train station and the Acela train went by at 100 miles an hour. They didn't even consider us. Didn't even consider us, not even a review, flew right through. And you know, if there was something out there, I'm all ears, you know, but I just don't see it. And when we look at the numbers that are here, we look at the projects that are here, John, if you get an idea and you can sell it and, you know, and make me feel comfortable with these numbers and whatever, I'm game, but I just don't see it right now. I really don't. We need a zoo. We have a zoo there. I can name the zoos. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. McCrisky. I'm looking around. I say, Mr. Carrera.
Through you to Mr. Tisdale, the McNamara well, how close is that going to, or how much buffer will we get off that well?
There's nothing to
Well,
stop.
1,200?
Two-thirds of the way away, I think.
I have to see a map to see how far away that well is. I mean, it's a good distance away from this piece of property, though.
It is?
Yeah. It's I gotta say, 1,000 feet, 1,500 feet, something like that.
So the process is, just so everyone knows, the select board will ask our questions and then we'll open it up to citizens. So you, no. Vice Chair Cavey?
Oh, no, I just I wanted to make some comments, but I think that that's probably more appropriate for the deliberations part. So I just wanted to see if we could sort of move it along, see if there are members of the community who had questions. So you're already on top of it.
I recognize Mr. Gito.
Thank you. 20 lots would net about $7 million because that's what lots are selling for now, about $350,000 a lot. Somebody's going to make some good money on this at some point in time. We're not going to do that, but I think that Mr. Tisdale had a point. I also think that even if it were developed in a conventional way, it might be worth the town thinking of buying one of those lots and providing the opportunity for people to be able to put a kayak in on that part of the pond. It's a beautiful area. It would provide some recreational opportunities. And for $350,000, it might not be a bad deal.
So, Mr. Gito, do you think the owner would be willing to divide the parcel up a little?
I have no clue. The developer at the present time says he's not, or the owner says he's not planning to develop the property. This is not something to be dealt with today or tomorrow. I was only putting that out as an opportunity to think ahead to what might occur in the future and not just let the whole thing go without any opportunity for the town to get something back on a piece of property that is really quite a gem.
I would be receptive to that, me personally, and I would like to hear more about that. Mr. Linehan or Mr. Tisdale,
Yeah,
can you
no,
comment?
I'll just say-
Bill on the line, or
The,
go to the citizens?
this parcel is composed of 2 lots right now, right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, I mean, just to pick up too, I mean, like Mr. Carrera made a good point. You wouldn't want a subdivision in this area to be like a couple subdivisions that are 40Bs that we have in town, where the houses are literally on top of each other. That wouldn't fit the character of that neighborhood for sure. But for example, in this area, the lot size, I believe, is 55,000 square feet. A developer, if you waived half that lot size, you still have over a half an acre of land. The houses will be on nice parcels of land. The ones in Goddard Highlands, those I think are on 0.1 acres of land each. It's a very small, tight neighborhood. This would still look like a nice subdivision. So there's, like I said, there's a couple tools. Even like the previous speaker said, with a conventional subdivision, we could acquire a lot. There may be also a portion of that land that's unusable for the 20 acres that we could still get an easement through some of the lots to get access to that land. So we have a lot of options at our hand to still be able to use the recreational benefits of that piece of property.
Mr. Carrera.
The zoning is 55,000, right? I wouldn't even want to see it go as far as a half acre. We're on a little more than a half acre on the corner lot where we live, and I find it not enough. But I would probably broker something down to maybe an acre, where it was at one time before they pushed it up. But if Stoughton had gone 2 acre zoning like they were going to do long time ago, we wouldn't be sitting here worrying about it, because then it'd be the houses amount that we could deal with. But I don't see, brokering down to make it that dense. I think if we pulled it to the original zoning where it was at 1 acre from where they pushed it up, that would be a good set with the way the retention basins you designed to be close to the roads, maybe sitting on a lot that isn't the best, so it's not in the backyard of somebody's house and they don't know what it's doing until the town comes in to clean it. And then they're going through the yard, so there's that stuff that'll come later on if they do develop it. I hope the person wants to keep it, but everything's money.
Thank you very much. Any other board comments? If not, I'll open it up to the citizens. Any citizens' comments? If there are, please step forward and use a microphone. I will also check online to see if you have any questions after this gentleman. Please state your name and your address.
My name is Mark Thomas. I actually don't live in Stoughton currently. I live in Canton, but I own the property you guys are all discussing tonight. I just want to let you know I purchased a property about, 8 to 10 years ago, and my daughter, who's with me tonight, she's very passionate about horseback riding, and I bought it for that. The horseback riding world, like the horse world, I guess you call it, is nothing but a money pit, and I've been doing what I can to keep things going over there. I love the property, and I wasn't intending on selling it. The person who's currently trying to buy it had been coming there through the years with his family and stuff, just to kind of, for the piece of it and stuff, and he's become a friend of mine, and he approached me to buy it. And I'm in a position with it right now where I don't absolutely need to sell it, but he's the right person for it. You guys all talking about subdivisions is like, I don't even know what you're talking about, because this guy's a person of God. He's a very honest person. I trust him dearly, and he's not going to develop it. I mean, I can't say that in writing. I'm just saying that's what he tells me. Once he owns it, it's his. But the thing is he approached me about 6 months ago. I believe we're on, how many days have you guys had to make your decision on whether you want to buy it or not? You know what the timeline is on that, by chance?
Attorney,
It was originally, the original public hearing was the end of November, so we would have had to have received it, I think, 30 days before then.
yes.
Because I just feel like personally, and I'm sorry, don't take this the wrong way, I just feel like I'm getting kind of the runaround, because originally what I was told, I wasn't here, and that's why I'm here tonight, is that my paperwork wasn't good. I put the wrong phone number down. I put my attorney's phone number on there, and thinking that's, so like, but at this point, it's kind of like, I'm just saying, if we can't get this figured out, and I lose him as a buying opportunity with him, then I get a line of people that want to buy it that are developers, and I don't want to go that route. I love the place. I love the land. It's beautiful. I always call it Iowa and Massachusetts. And this guy who's buying it has no intentions and I'm going to talk to him tomorrow about it, but I don't know anything about a subdivision going in and all that stuff. And he's got 2 small children. He wants to live there, and it's like the perfect place for him. Like I said, I don't currently live there. I mean, so with that being said, I mean, I own the place, and I rent the house, and my daughter runs the horse barn. So I just didn't know. I just want to see that this gets resolved tonight. That's why I'm here, because I'm like kind of running out of time. I really want to close on this before the new year, and I feel like it's kind of like we'll get off the pot. You know what I mean? That's just kind of where I'm at with it. So that's all. I don't know if you have any questions for me.
Thank you very much. I don't think we have. I'm looking around. We don't have any.
Just
Yes,
like to
Mr.
respond. Pleasure to meet you.
Yeah.
You truly have a little piece of heaven there.
I know. Thank you.
Without a doubt. And I work for companies, when you say the horse world, I work for transportation companies that take show horses all over the country.
Oh, okay, yeah.
The money, they joke about a boat being a black hole in the water, and the horse world is a whole different world.
A whole different world.
I mean, unbelievable. But I just look at it, and I hope you can understand, whenever we have a piece of property like that, the first thing that's talked about in this town is development.
Of course.
And I would love to see it, and I would hope you'd change your mind and hang on to it. But, again, not my business. But again, my words really, I've got to reaffirm, and I won't be voting for it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you're looking for as an answer. And just what I mentioned earlier, I would love to have it myself. I mean, really, I said if we had hit the $1.5 billion a little while ago, that'd be mine.
Yeah.
That'd be mine, but the biggest gate around it, too.
Yeah.
But, so I just wanted to respond to that, and I thank you for standing up and saying something, introducing yourself.
I just want to let you know that the guy who wants to buy it is going to do more with that place, make it more beautiful. It's me alone there, and he's going to make that place better than it already is. And he lives in town currently. He runs a massive business in town. He's a very well-known, very well-liked guy. I think you guys are going to be very happy with him. Good. If he buys it. But that's all I want to say.
Pleasure to meet you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Thank
and thank
you.
you for your comments.
Likewise. Thank you.
I'm looking online. Are there any other citizens' comments?
Yeah, me, Peter.
Oh, hello, Mr. Ventresco. Please state your name and address, please.
Peter Ventresco, 587 10th Street. I'm glad the land got clarified. I thought this was the same piece of property up there on West Street they bought forward a couple of years ago to spend $1 million plus for an easement to get to some land, and it was just for the $1 million was going to give us first refusal. So this came up being presented the same way. I thought it was the same property. But exactly where is this property on West Street? Hello?
Sorry, Peter, the address is 1515 West Street.
Oh,
I mean,
the guys
I don't know how to be more specific, unfortunately.
just way down near the lake where McNamara had his horse barn. Oh,
Yes.
okay. All right. So one of the gentlemen on your board mentioned for the town to buy a parcel of land here to get canoes in there, which is a waste of money because 80% of the summer that dries up is just a dry mud cake like out in the desert. So it'd be a waste of money for canoes because there's no water there most of the time. All right, but also the town can't afford it, and the Mr. Linehan already said they don't have the money. So I'm against buying this property as a taxpayer because we're getting taxed to death. And the other question I have for Mr. Linehan, I never get this answer on other subjects when we come up to buy land. Just how much land do we own for open space? Acres?
Oh,
1,000?
I'm sorry, Mr. Ventresco. Mr. Linehan is talking with the owner. He didn't hear your question.
Well, I would, if he's back, I would like to know how much land we own for open space.
I don't know that answer right now.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we have more than enough land. It's probably like 5 acres per person in the town. So we're running out of land to build houses. That's the known fact.
Peter, you've made your view known at every land acquisition argument we've had.
Okay. All right. Saying that, okay, I'll let it go. I'm against this. Thank you very much for hearing me.
Thank you, Mr. Ventresco. Are there any other citizens' questions? With that, I'll accept a
Motion
motion.
to close the public hearing?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I move that we waive the right of first refusal.
Second.
This one was difficult for me. I kind of felt like there's a paradox called bird and donkey, where if you have a starving donkey that's equally distant between two piles of hay, and it can't. There's no real reason why it'd pick one over the other. It would just sit right in the middle and starve to death, unable to make this decision. I felt like I was right on this line where I could see, both sides of this argument. I really couldn't find something that would knock me one way or the other. On the one hand, open space is great for the community. Even if I disagree with this project, I also feel that anytime somebody's coming to the select board with what looks to me like something they would like to have addressed by town meeting, I want to respect that and allow town meeting the opportunity to vote on it. But when I look at the economics, it does not make a lot of sense to me. As a town meeting rep, I would probably be voting against it based on the information I have right now. And my main concern at this point is if there's no clear path to a 2/3 vote in town meeting, or if we just take the various committees that have already weighed in on it, I think we'd have difficulty justifying this town meeting. We probably would not get the 2/3 that necessary. All we will have done is spent 6 months of the developer's time, not developers, the buyer and seller's time, and I find that to be unjust. I think that's not a good use of and I think of our authority in this case. So I don't think it would ever get to town meeting. It wouldn't pass town meeting, and for that reason, I think it's appropriate to waive this waive our rights here. We have no intended use for it.
Thank you, Vice Chair Cavey.
that
So
your
we have a
motion?
motion.
I already made the motion. Joe seconded it.
It was to waive. Okay. So, Mr. Gito, how do you vote? You vote yes to waive. Yes. Mr. McCrisky?
I'm not in favor of it. No. What's it? I don't, no, I want to waive it. I don't.
Motion is to waive.
Waiving means we're not moving forward.
Right.
Correct.
Waiving means we're not moving forward.
Okay, I didn't hear the word waiving. I knew I just wasn't voting for it, so, okay, yeah, yes.
Vice Chair Cavey?
Yes.
Mr. Carrera? Waiving means we're not moving forward. We're giving up our rights.
Waive, right? Waive. I waive.
And I also vote to waive. We love open space, but we just can't afford it. And usually when we have consider our debt obligations, we first look at what debt is maturing and is rolling off so we can bring on new debt, and that has been our process. But currently, we just don't have that capacity. So I vote to waive as well. So it's unanimous. And with that said, that closes this section of the agenda, and we're moving on to the next. The next is, first did we vote to close the public hearing?
Yeah.
No, we already did. We already closed it. So,
So the next is a public hearing, alleged liquor license violation at Golden Palace, 300 Washington Street. Votes may be taken. The presenter will be Sergeant James O'Connor, but I've heard that he is out today. So we have an option. We do have the owners here and the representatives. So we have the option of referring to the backup documentation or postponing it to another date. So what is the wish of the board? We do have information.
Oh, the officer isn't here, right?
The officer is not here.
Why don't you ask Mr. Lee what he thought?
Mr. Lee? I'll ask Mr. Lee, and then I'll ask our town council, and then I'll ask my fellow select board members, how would they like to proceed?
We'll prefer to proceed today.
You prefer to proceed. Mr. Attorney Winter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was made aware at the last minute, actually, that Sergeant O'Connor was not available this evening. He is the town's witness. He is the responding officer with respect to the violation that you would be considering this evening. So in his absence, you only have his documentation, but he's not here to testify to his observations or answer any questions for the board. So when you have a hearing like this, it's quasi-adjudicatory. It's both sides get to tell their story. Unfortunately, we can't tell our side of the story right now. So although the establishment would like to proceed, all we would be able to hear is their version of the facts. We wouldn't be able to hear Sergeant O'Connor's. I understand that the chief and deputy chief are willing, at least offered, to read the report into the record. I thought that was a little unnecessary because you have the report already, but also because they weren't there, and so they won't be able to respond to any defenses or issues raised by the establishment. I'm not saying that this is the most complicated case that this board has ever heard or ever will hear, but nevertheless, the responding officer should be able to address the board. So it's the board's choice. If you want to proceed tonight, we can proceed on the record. You can hear from the applicant and make a decision based on that record. I think you'd be benefited by hearing from Sergeant O'Connor. That being said, it would probably be, another 2 weeks to the board's next meeting, so it would be the January meeting. So if it's critical to handle this business before the new year, I defer to the board's judgment on that.
I am open to a motion. Vice Chair Cavey.
yeah, well, just before we do, I'm happy to make a motion, but through you to Attorney Winter, procedurally, we would still open the public meeting tonight and then postpone it, or would we simply hold off on opening the public meeting until some future time?
I wouldn't open it. I would just continue it to do a date and time certain.
Perfect.
Hi,
Okay.
Can I address you? Hi,
Yes, you certainly can.
Hi, Madam Chair. I'm here with my father, Peter
This
Lee.
is my son, Stephen,
Yes.
and John,
Yeah,
they
we-
come here today
yeah.
with me,
Yeah. This is a small business. Peter has been here for 40 plus years. We're here just to support him, and yes.
Excuse me, you're giving explanation, and we, in all fairness,
yes.
we would like to hear both sides at the same time.
Okay.
Thank you very much for understanding.
what the Madam Chairman would like to hear from you guys. She's going to offer you another date to come back, and you have to tell her if it's acceptable or if you need more time, because the officer can't be here, and our town council says we shouldn't proceed unless both sides can tell their story.
But excuse, I come here twice in court today. The police officer, he's right, I'm wrong, because at that night I made a big mistake. But I don't know.
Excuse me. We're doing the same thing.
May I make an offer, Madam Chair?
Yes, please.
After you make your decision tonight, either to continue or proceed, I'm happy to speak to the operator, the owner of the establishment. If he has counsel, I can speak with counsel. Maybe there's a stipulation or an offer they're interested in making the board that might obviate the need for a full hearing. But I'm happy to do that offline between now and the next meeting if the board's okay with that.
Yeah, so just for the sake of moving things along, our next meeting is on the 28th, if I'm not mistaken, correct? Okay. So I move that we continue the public hearing until December 28th.
December. Mm-hmm.
December 28th at, 7:05 p.m., so we can get it started at the beginning of the meeting. 7:05.
Wait just a minute. Mr. Gito had a question?
That would be the earliest time that we could meet. Is there a meeting after that that would be after the new year that may be more convenient for everyone?
I'm fine with that. The next meeting would be...
Would that be better for...
January 2nd or January 9th? I mean, I don't see this as necessary.
Can't be here the second. Oh, wait.
Yes, it's my son's birthday, so I probably shouldn't either. I'm not going to be feeling too well that day, but the perhaps January 9th.
So
Sound good? So the motion is to continue the public hearing until January 9th.
Is that convenient for them?
we will ask. But before we ask you this question, what happens in the interim from now until our next meeting, our public hearing? Will they operate as usual, or?
Yes, they will. They have a valid liquor license until the board takes any action to suspend or revoke it. So it's business as usual from their perspective.
So what we're saying is our next public hearing is January 9th. But in the meantime, you would operate as usual.
I don't understand why had they come here 2-3 times for hearing. I only offer time for half hour. I am in Stoughton for 42 years almost. I never caused any trouble to the town. I never caused it. I am I love the Stoughton. The people, most of the people, they know me. I'm here for 42 years in business. I live in Stoughton for 36 years. Then only now this case is either you give me the chance for let me go, or either suspend my license. I don't want to come back here for 2-3 times for I'm open for only half hour.
We understand.
Yeah, last month I am here, but but you don't let me go. You don't let me talk, right. And let me go home, and the police all over here with the chief, but I don't have the chance to say anything. Now today I come back here, then only for it's not the really big case, but why had to come here for 3 times for hearing? I don't understand,
So our process is, the first time we had your issue on the agenda, it was to hear from the sergeant briefly and the board had to weigh in if there was enough to have a public hearing. Now this time, which is the second time that you're on our agenda, is we advertised and we were having a public hearing, and that's to hear your side, the Sergeant O'Connor side, and then we would ask questions, and so would the citizens.
Why he not
ask
come?
questions.
Why he not come? He supposed he know today visa. I had the hearing. Why he not come? Only I come.
Unexpectedly, I'm so sorry you feel this way, but unexpectedly, he was sick, and we just heard about it just right before our meeting started.
But this one is not my fault. I
That's
come
what
with my
we're going-
two sons
that's
here.
what we're gonna
I
determine.
come here with my two sons, and I
Can
try
you-
to be expand to the town.
Are you available to come back on the 9th, on January 9th?
I don't know because I had a lot of things to do. Sometimes,
Yeah.
Sometimes,
Well, yeah, so we're going to finalize it based on January 9th, and then we hope you can come back so you could tell us your side of the story. We would really like that
My
to happen.
story I told the town.
Yeah,
I
but
apologize.
But it has to be weighed against some other information.
Madam
So
Chair?
there is a motion, and Mr. Gito.
Could I, there was a suggestion that our attorney speak with the company, the persons here,
Yes.
and see if they could reach some agreement
Yes.
in the interim time period, and then we wouldn't have to have a meeting if we can reach an agreement. And that way, they don't have to come back, and we could just resolve the issue. So I would be looking to use that route rather than, we could set a hearing date, but we could try to resolve it in another way so that we don't inconvenience anyone.
That's a great idea.
That was,
What-
The only
we have
thing, Madam,
The emotion,
the only,
just a minute, too many hands in the pot right now. So, Mr. Carrara?
the only thing is, we would have to, at one of the meetings, say what the finding was, because it's been advertised, and I don't want anybody to think that we swept it, that if Attorney Winter works out a deal that's comparable to both sides, that's all we have to do is take his wording, and it's over.
So in that case, Vice Chair Cavey, a friendly amendment?
Sure. What exactly would be the amendment? I mean, I think that continuing the public hearing until the 9th would still be what we'd be doing.
Yes.
And so that doesn't change. Now, if there's no reason for a public hearing on the 9th, then at the public meeting, or at the 9th, we just say there's no longer a purpose for this meeting.
But we would give the results of Attorney Winter's conversation, negotiation, finalization.
Correct. So I don't think we need any sort of amendment to this motion, but I could be mistaken.
Okay. Attorney Winter, can you help us with this motion?
I think the motion's fine.
Okay.
I just wanted to remind the board that no matter what I negotiate, I have no authority to impose it or agree to it without this board. And so I have to bring it back. And so I may put some suggestions on the table, and I may make a recommendation, but the board will have to take it up on the 9th, might adopt that recommendation, might reject that recommendation. If you reject it, we'll proceed with the hearing.
Perfect. Okay. Motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. Okay. That's what we'll do.
Yep.
So did you understand? I think after, we're going to move forward with our next agenda item. Attorney Winter will meet with you outside and explain all of this to you.
Yeah, thank you so
very
much.
Thank you so much.
So we'll wait for
suggestion.
Attorney Winter to reach out
Yes.
to us. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. And we're going to transition. We're going to transition to item annual licenses renewal, complete applications, incomplete applications, Mrs. Carrera and Ms. Johnson.
Madam Chair, may I give an introduction before they?
Yes, please do,
as they
Mr.
approach
Coulter.
The microphone. As you know, the month of December is a very busy time for license renewals. This year we had about 115 applications. It was a very unusual year where the applicants turned in information late, and quite frankly, we were late in responding to their non-responses. So tonight before you, we've got 90 approved applications that have been prepared properly and fully reviewed and vetted by me and my office. We've got 25 outstanding licenses. As you can see from the comment section, several who have decided not to renew, who have either sold their business, closed their business, others who have not responded at all, and we have literally knocked on their doors to explore whether they're renewing their licenses or not. We're asking that the final license approvals, which we expect will be somewhere around 15, be put on the agenda for our December 28th meeting. It'll be very quick, expedient. Our town inspector, our town building inspector, our code enforcement officer have been literally knocking on doors, asking why some candidates, why some applicants haven't responded. And you'll note the names of the applicants are major restaurant chains. You should know that between this office and the building office, they received 2 letters in the last 3 months and received a certified letter, those who have not applied, on the 13th. And still, there are some major chains, as you note from the applicant's name, that our team is knocking on their doors, asking them why they have not responded, and that their applicants, that their licenses will expire at midnight on December 31st. So with that, unless the board has questions, the clerk and her assistant can speak to the 90 approved applications, and we will take up the remaining, I think it'll be 15 applications on the 28th. Thank you, Madam Chair, for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Coulter. Vice Chair Cavey.
Sorry, let me just open this request up.
While Steve is doing that, you'll note there are 2 documents. One are those that have been fully vetted and approved, and the others are those we wish to take up on December 28th.
Perfect. And I think, I just wanted to give credit where it's due. This list of ones that are still open, I think this is pretty light. We've had some years where there's been a lot. And I know that the work of the clerk's office and town manager's office has prioritized this, and so this is really a sign of just excellent work and cooperation. So I just want to thank everybody for all they've done to make this easy on us. Man, this application's buried. Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. Okay, so Town of Stoughton notice of public hearing. A public meeting will be held by the Select Board on Tuesday, December 19th, 2023, at 8:30 p.m. to consider the renewal of all licenses issued by the Select Board for calendar year 2024. The hearing will be conducted both in person at the Great Hall, 3rd floor of Town Hall, 10 Pearl Street, Stoughton, Massachusetts, and virtually via Google Meets. It may be broadcast via Stoughton Media Access Television and live stream. Google Meets video link and telephone connection for the public comment available on the website www.stoughton.org/selectboard. By calling the Select Board office at 781-341-1300, extension 9212, or email to gpereira@stoughton-ma.gov, per order of Deborah C. Roberts, Chair, acting as licensing authority. Thank you.
Motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Well, hello, how are you? Please state your names and your titles.
Good evening. I am Stephanie Carrara. I am the town clerk.
Good evening. I'm Kelly Johnson, and I'm the assistant town clerk.
Thank you. Thank you for being here tonight. Please take it away.
Well, just to touch on what the town manager had explained, we worked extremely hard on getting this in order, and we submitted all the applications to the Select Board's office. The town manager reviewed it, and all are complete, whether they are going to renew or not. On the 28th, you'll be hearing 6, and there'll be 6 that are complete, and then there are 5 that are working on getting their completion into us.
Thank you.
Yeah, we got to read them all.
Okay, so you want to chair? You want to share or?
No, I've done it in the past. I should have gotten a glass of water, but I'll read them.
Okay.
Okay, so I move that we approve the following Class 2 licenses. 1450 Washington Street LLC at 1450 Washington Street. Apex Auto Body at 1228 Park Street. I'm going to have to do this online. I can't even see this anymore.
Want my glasses?
Yeah, let me get real big. C&J Auto Body.
Is that the packet?
Yeah.
It's changed.
Oh, geez. Okay.
I'm going to email you then you.
Okay. C&J Auto Body, oh, you're the best, thanks. C&J Auto Body and Sales at 1264 Washington Street. Central Auto Exchange Incorporated at 1152 Washington Street. Chambers Motor LLC at 1262 Washington Street. Element Financial at 1254 Washington Street. Frank's Quality Auto Sales at LLC at 1069 Washington Street. G&E Getty Incorporated at 584 Pearl Street. Hugert and Ewing at 1305 Washington Street. Lucky Star Petroleum at 825 Washington Street. Pinnacle Imports at 346 Washington Street. Sam's Getty Incorporated at 452 Canton Street. Sherms Incorporated at 32 Cushing Street. Stoughton Auto Sales LLC at 7 Cabot Place, Suite 5. Okay. Stoughton Valero at 645 Washington Street, and Tom's Auto Rentsport Incorporated at 233 Canton Street. So we'll need a second for that.
Second.
Okay. So a motion was made and seconded, Madam Chair?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye as well. Thank you.
Oh, public hearing, yeah.
And so we have to ask, you made the motion.
Yeah.
Before we vote, what happens here? I'm saying, you have to ask the question.
Okay, so let's just clear up the procedurally. It's been a while since I've done one of these, I guess, so maybe I've forgotten. Obviously, it's a public hearing, so the public has to be able to have input. Normally with public hearings, we would sort of wait until the end of all of our deliberate, discussions and questions that people might have, and then we would close the public hearing and then deliberate. Someone will make a motion. It's a little bit different here. It seems, since we have an attorney here, can you help us understand this process so we do it correctly?
I don't believe that I've actually gone through this process with you before, but I'm happy to do the best I can to provide a little guidance. I don't think there's one size fits all necessarily, right? And so you have a long list. You may have questions on some, all, however you want to go through. Typically, after identifying the license holders that are up for renewal, that you're going to be eventually making a motion and voting on, you may have some questions. You may want to make a motion, then go into deliberations, then hear. But since it's a public hearing, I would imagine you'd benefit from hearing the comments before your motion and discussion. So you may want to open it up, or at least ask if there's any members of the public who wish to be heard on any of the addresses that were just identified in your prefatory reading of the list. And if you've gotten through those, if you've heard none, or if you've heard some and you've resolved them, then you could go and proceed with a motion to take action on each of those.
Auto sales, we're taking that off. Just notified they're closing.
Right. On the ones that you've identified up until that point.
He is correct. 7 Cabot Place should be up there. Frank's good quality.
Thank you for that clarification, Attorney Winter. We'll proceed once we know we have the final current
Two minor corrections.
list.
So that's closed. And this is,
There's some discrepancies, is
Okay.
what I'm gathering.
Few addresses that need to be reconciled.
Yes.
Okay. So once we've done that, let's just make sure the record's clear and read those out. Not repeating the whole list necessarily, but just the corrections that are made so that the minutes can be clear, and of course, the affected businesses will know they were correctly identified.
Would you like a 5-minute recess?
Yeah, I think that'd be helpful. There's a couple of edits that we have to make to this, and
we'll
so I'll just start by withdrawing that motion. We'll have to start fresh on this.
Okay. We will take a 5-minute recess and reconvene. Okay, we're going to reconvene the Select Board meeting at 9:03 p.m. Vice Chair Cavey, public hearing on the annual license renewal. In front of us, we have our town clerk and assistant town clerk.
Perfect.
Mrs. Herrera and Ms. Johnson.
So I'm going to read through these. I'm going to read through all of the applications we've received information. These have all been reviewed by town staff. There's no issues with their applications, and they're all. I think they're all licenses that we've approved. So we're just continuing on with the license they've already have. And so I'm just going to read through all of the licenses, the businesses, and their addresses. If I make a mistake, if anybody is aware of a mistake, please stop me and just let me know, and we'll change it now. We will then have opportunity for the Select Board to have any comments or questions to the clerk's office. And if, once that's resolved, or those are questions have been asked, we will have the public have an opportunity to speak. At that point, once all of those questions have been answered, we will then close the public hearing, followed by a vote from the board to approve those licenses as listed. So I'm going to start by just listing all of the applications. And these are all applications that we are able to approve tonight. There's no issues with any of these. Class 2 license, the following are Class 2 licenses that we are voting on tonight. 1450 Washington Street, LLC, at 1450 Washington Street. Apex Auto Body at 1228 Park Street. C&J Auto Body and Sales at 1264 Washington Street. Chambers Motors, LLC, at 1262 Washington Street. Element Financial at 1254 Washington Street. Frank's Quality Auto Sales, LLC, at 7 Cabot Place. G&E Getty. Yes.
Central Auto Exchange at 1152 Washington Street? Say that one?
No, I haven't said that yet. No, right now, that was a Class 3 license, I believe. These are all the ones that are listed as Class 2 licenses.
Okay, thank you. And then Element Financial at 1254 Washington Street. That's a Class 2.
I think we just need a moment to confirm that we've got a couple lists that have different class licenses listed on them. On the spreadsheet I've just received, it lists those as Class 3 licenses. Let's see. Central Auto Exchange is listed as a Class 3 license on the spreadsheet I have, but on the piece of paper I have, it says Class 2. Do we know which license they?
Class 3. Central Auto Exchange is a Class 3 license.
Class 3, perfect. So that's at 1152, so I'll read that when we're doing the Class 3 licenses. And was there another one?
Element Financials is on 1254 Washington Street, Class 2. Number 6 on the original list.
Okay, so if I missed that, I apologize. So that is Element, so this is also a Class 2 license, Element Financial at 1254 Washington Street.
And then Frank's Quality Auto Sales, that was removed from my list.
I think it just had a change of address. That was a 7 Cabot, so that's still on there.
Change of address.
Yep, so we're still good on that. Then we have G&E Getty Incorporated at 584 Pearl Street, Hugert and Ewing at 1305 Washington Street, Lucky Star Petroleum at 825 Washington Street, Pinnacle Imports at 346 Washington Street, Sam's Getty Incorporated at 452 Canton Street, Sherm's Incorporated at 32 Cushing Street, Stoughton Valero at 645 Washington Street, and Tom's Auto Transport at Incorporated at 233 Canton Street. So those are all the Class 2 licenses. The following are the Class 3 licenses we'll be voting on tonight. Central Auto Exchange Incorporated at 1152 Washington Street, M&D Core Incorporated at 295 Canton Street. We have one Class 3 license and also a pawn license. This is for DLR Core Supply at 1186 Washington Street. Tonight we'll be discussing also or voting on the following club, all alcohol, amusement, and entertainment license. The Club of San John Philharmonica Society at 845 Washington Street. We'll be voting on the following club, all alcohol, amusement, and Sunday entertainment license, which is Club Luis de Camões Incorporated at 76 Porter Street. We'll be discussing and voting on the following club, all alcohol, amusement, and entertainment license, which is Michael Romanuk, VFW post number 1645 at 837 Washington Street. We'll be voting on the following club, all alcohol and entertainment license at the Portuguese National Club Incorporated at 21 Railroad Ave. We'll be voting on the following common vicular licenses. Brazil for You Incorporated at 646 Washington Street. Burger King at 1333 Park Street. Burger King at 299 Washington Street, D'Angelo Sandwich Shop at 2137 Central Street, Do Brasil Market Incorporated at 22 Porter Street, Dunkin' Donuts at 1516 Turnpike Street, Dunkin' Donuts at 438 Washington Street, Dunkin's at 287 Park Street, Facial Steakhouse at 713 Washington Street, Jersey Mike's Subs at 421 Washington Street, KFC Taco Bell at 265 Washington Street, Lucky Garden Restaurant at 773 Washington Street, Lucky Pizza at 356 Washington Street, Maxie's Deli at 117 Sharon Street, Old Country Pizzeria at 672 Washington Street, Perio Fino do Brasil Restaurant Incorporated at 79 Canton Street, Right Taste Jamaican Restaurant at 354 Washington Street, Roxanne's Taqueria LLC at 95 Sharon Street, Rumai Thai Cuisine at 1778 Washington Street, Smack Pizza at 111 Sharon Street, Sonic Drive-In at 630 Washington Street, Stoughton Pizza at 875 Washington Street, Sunshine Brazilian Restaurant at 2 Canton Street, the Wendy's Corp at 355 Washington Street, Aurea Love Story at 434 Pearl Street. I always mispronounce this one, so let's see if we can get it right. Saint Athanasius Central Street Pizza, apologies if I made a mistake there, at 37 Dykeman Way. Stoughton Bakery at 2729 Wyman Street. Those are all the common vicular licenses, and I'm starting to get hungry. These places look, I love a lot of these places, and I wish they were open right now. We're voting on the following common vicular license and all alcohol license at Chinatown, 103 Sharon Street. We'll be discussing and voting on the following common vicular license and package store / all alcohol at BJ's Wholesale Club number 34, 901 Technology Center Drive. We'll be discussing and voting on the following common vicular licenses and all alcohol licenses. Avocados Mexican Restaurant at 809 Washington Street, La Stalla Restaurant at 559 Washington Street, Olivio's Grill and Pizzeria at 752 Washington Street, Smoky Bones Bar and Fire Grill at 301 Technology Center Drive, Susu Sushi Japanese Restaurant at 408 Washington Street, and Toffee Social Bar and Lounge at 10 Wyman Street. Okay, we'll be discussing and voting on the following common vicular all alcohol amusement and entertainment license at Golden Palace Incorporated at 300 Washington Street. We'll be discussing and voting on the following common vicular all alcohol entertainment and amusement license at J&G Hillside Grill at 1137 Park Street. We'll be discussing and voting on the following common vicular all alcohol entertainment licenses. Alex's Babe Watch Incorporated at 584 Washington Street, Amelia's at 217 Washington Street, Backstreet Grill and Tavern at 531 Pearl Street, Chateau of Stoughton at 1165 Park Street, Juanita Steakhouse at 577 Washington Street, Mean-Do Restaurant at 657 Washington Street, Paris Cabaret at 49 Monk Street, Stoughton Town Spa at 1119 Washington Street, TGI Fridays at 2 Hawes Way. We'll be discussing and voting on the following common vicular all alcohol and amusement license, Public House 02072 at 37 Monk Street. And also the following common vicular and amusement licenses, Papa Gino's at 319 Washington Street, Kids Sport at 11 Evans Drive. Be voting on the following common vicular club all alcohol and amusement license, Charles H. Lane AmVets Post number 1977 at 1575 Central Street. Be voting on the following common vicular inn holder and all alcohol, PVG 5 Hospitality Incorporated / Hampton Inn at 449 Page Street. We'll be voting on discussing and voting on the following common vicular package store and all alcohol license at Bob's Famous Food Mart at 289 Park Street. Okay, we'll be discussing and voting on the following common vicular all alcohol licenses at Mr. Chef's, 490 Washington Street. We'll be discussing and voting on the following fortune teller license at Angela's Palm and Card Readings at 968 Central Street. And the following lodge house licenses at 118 Pleasant Street, Realty Trust at 118 Pleasant Street, Saxon Management LLC at 99-101 Porter Street, Station Lodging LLC at 820 Washington Street. Okay, we'll be discussing and voting on the following package store and all alcohol licenses. New World Liquors at 676 Washington Street, and Page's Grocery and Liquor Incorporated at 458 Pearl Street. We're discussing and voting on the following package store and beer and wine licenses. J&I Variety at 742 Washington Street, Jimmy's Market at 253 Pleasant Street, Neighborhood Variety at 257 School Street, new store on the block at 430 Park Street. We'll be discussing and voting on the following package store / all alcohol license. Andretti Liquors at 270 Washington Street and Central Liquors Mart at 21 Wyman Street. Sorry, yeah, Andretti Liquors is at 280 Washington Street, and Central Liquors Mart is at 21 Wyman Street. We'll be discussing voting on the following package store and beer and wine license at Andy's Food Mart, 330 Morton Street. We'll be discussing and voting on the following secondhand shop and pawn store licenses at Empire Loans of Stoughton, LLC at 353 Washington Street. And finally, we're discussing and voting on the following taxi license at the Right Ride, 33 Clark Drive in Walpole. Those are all the licenses that we have listed here. So, next step in the process is if the Select Board have any questions for the Town Clerk regarding these licenses.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Coulter.
Madam Clerk, have we covered all of those on your list? Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Coulter.
Let's open it up to the Select Board. Any questions? With there being none, let's open it up to the citizens. Oh, yes, Mrs. Walsh, please state your name and address.
Cynthia Walsh, 1096 Park Street. I may have misheard, but on the Right Ride, I think it's Clarkson Drive. I heard Clark. But obviously my hearing isn't perfect.
Well, I'm in the same boat. My hearing's not that great also. But so I'll reread it. But what I intended to say is that the truck taxi license at for the Right Ride at 33 Clarkson Drive, Walpole.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Walsh.
Are there any other citizens' comments? Mrs. Walsh?
Yes, Cynthia Walsh. I went through this in the past 8 times, and this is the first time a certain national hamburger joint ×2 has not been on the naughty list. it's nice to see them on the nice list.
That's great, yes. Okay.
With no further questions, I'd like to move that we close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well.
Okay. I move that we approve the licenses as read.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Thank you. So the next step is those on the pending application list. We will discuss that, what is that, December 28th at our next meeting? Okay. All right. Thank you very much. I think that's it for the licensing for tonight. Okay, moving right along.
Give her a I'll be right back.
Okay. The next is to item number 6, to consider and retain special counsel regarding PFAS litigation. Votes may be taken. So, Mr. Attorney Winter, would you like to give us a little introduction on this?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm happy to. So just to refresh everyone's memory, this agenda item came up a few weeks ago. I had mentioned to the board that I was still vetting some of the candidate law firms. I had spoken with one, but not the other at that time. I've since spoken with both of them. You have two sort of finalists, if you will, in front of you for your consideration tonight. One is a New York firm, that's Napoli. The other is led by a lead partner on the litigation who's, I believe, in New Orleans, but he has local affiliates here. And so that firm is the Stag Liuzza firm. And so when I had first looked at this, one of the considerations that I had, obviously, was what was the best deal for Stoughton. The New York firm, that's the Napoli firm, was proposing no cost to the town of Stoughton whatsoever, no out-of-pocket costs, and they would take a flat 25% fee from any settlement funds or any judgment that they obtain for the town in the PFAS litigation. And by the way, just for what it's worth, the PFAS litigation refers to what's called multi-district litigation. There's currently 20 lawsuits in this first phase of it. 2 of those cases they have settlement proposals on the table. The thinking is that they'll probably get approved in January, but that's just 2 out of the 20. So there's 18 more just in that phase 1 group. So this is a very large national, grouping of litigation. And so the New York firm had proposed a flat 25% of any funds that were owing to Stoughton out of this, no matter what stage the case resulted in, if it was settled before trial, after trial, on appeal, et cetera. The local firm had proposed a different price structure. They have since revised that, and what you have in your package is their revised proposal. And so their fee structure essentially matches now. And so all things being equal, the fee structure is essentially the equivalent. So really, I think the choice comes down to if you want a New York firm that has no presence in Massachusetts, but does have a national presence, in PFAS and multi-district litigation, versus a firm that has a lead partner who certainly is capable and qualified of handling PFAS litigation and multi-district litigation, that also has a local presence. And so that's just a policy preference decision. One thing I will mention, and I can't obviously predict what's going to happen in the future of these cases, there's all kinds of branches that this is going to grow into. It's not just right now the discussion is with DuPont and 3M. There are going to be different phases that deal with different companies and different products, airports, phone, everything. And so this is going to be very extensive. Currently, the formula that's being proposed to resolve the 2 out of the 20 cases is simple algebra. And so I don't think it makes a large difference which firm you go with respect to that proposal, because it's just math right now. We already know the data for Stoughton through Mr. Tisdale and Mr. McNulty. We fill out all the forms, we've looked at all the numbers, and so that's all available, and it is what it is. What I can't predict, though, is what happens with everything else. I don't know if that'll adhere to the same formula. I don't know if that'll require a different type of representation. Both firms I think are well suited for this. Their lead attorneys are part of this process and embedded in this process. So I don't think there's a wrong choice. And I don't think you're going to lose out by making one or the other. So really, I leave it to you. In the beginning, I think I had a stronger preference, and I was ready to make a recommendation. Now that I've met with both firms and they've made some movements, I think they're very equally matched in terms of their ability to provide for the town of Stoughton. And so I wish I could be clearer, but unfortunately, I'm going to have to defer to your best judgment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Attorney Winter. So I gather you've never worked with either of these attorneys?
I've spoken, but not worked with them. And the way these special counsel relationships work for things like this is I would be essentially a liaison. I would bridge the gap between their firm and this town, but we would not be working together. I would have no part in this litigation other than to communicate.
So then I would turn it to Mr. Coulter. You have any experience, or have you heard?
I have not, and unless any board members have some personal experience, I would suggest we spot Mr. Winter and ask him for his recommendation.
And then back to you.
That's what I was looking for.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is
Local
the board's
or
decision,
national?
and I can't see all futures, and so I have a hard time predicting who's going to be the best choice. Initially, when it was a financial decision, that was easy. The firm that was going to take the biggest cut out of our award was going to be moving further down my list, right? But now that their price proposals are very equal, the choice, I think, comes down to whether or not the town's going to be better represented by a New York City law firm that does this for a living, and this is the bread and butter of their law firm, doing these large-scale class action litigations with PFAS, opioid, et cetera, or with a group that has a local presence. You'd have, an ability to have someone actually come to town hall and speak with you if you wish, and you can call them on a regular basis. That being said, the attorney who's actually going to be handling the litigation is out of state, and just like a Manhattan law firm, they're going to do what they do, and they're working within these different committees within the federal courts and this entire very complex litigation. And so the question is, which one of those choices puts Stoughton in a better position when people are negotiating at the table? And so when you're negotiating with DuPont, with 3M, with some of these other, national, international corporations, who's going to be representing Stoughton's best interests the best? That's hard to say, but I would think someone with the most experience, with the most established track record. The downside of that is the larger firm may have hundreds and hundreds of clients all over the country, and Stoughton may just be another name on that spreadsheet. And so while they may have the capability, Stoughton may not be particularly unique to them. A local firm may not have the same, arguably, I don't know personally, but may not have the same presence, but Stoughton would mean more to them. They're here. So they potentially would fight harder for a deal for their Massachusetts clients because they have a Massachusetts presence. Both firms represent dozens of communities across Massachusetts, and different cities and towns that I work with have gone in different directions. So like I said in the beginning, there isn't a wrong choice here. You're going to be well represented in both, and with both law firms.
Vice Chair Cavey.
So thank you for all that you've done to get as far as we are right now. The two firms I'm seeing, and I stepped away for a second while you were speaking, so you might have said it while I was away. But the two firms I'm seeing, one's from New York, and the other one has an address listed as New Orleans, Louisiana. Which one is the local firm?
So I'll be more specific. So Stagg, Liuzza, and Michael Stagg LLC, that's out of New Orleans. But the law office of Nicholas Riccio is also listed in the fee agreement. That's their local affiliate. And so Nick, Attorney Riccio, is the individual that I've been communicating with most often, although we all had a Zoom meeting together and I spoke with all of them at the same time. But he would be sort of the local face of that.
Okay. In our region, this is a question we might have at hand, so I apologize. But within our region, our surrounding towns, I know Sharon's in an agreement for this. I want to say Randolph as well. There might be other towns that are really surrounding us. Are many of them with one firm or the other in this case?
To my knowledge, and I haven't done a survey, but to my knowledge, your bordering communities have gone with this local firm. I believe Sharon is represented by them. A few other communities out in Eastern Mass as well, I believe. But I couldn't give you a breakdown out of 351 cities and towns, if that's...
Yeah, I knew it was out there, but if you just happen to know maybe some of the more local towns around us, and if you didn't have an answer at all, I wouldn't have been surprised. So that you knew of some is definitely helpful.
It's one of the questions that I asked so what I did is essentially interview on your behalf. And one of the questions I asked was about local presence and who they're representing here versus nationally. And so if one of these firms had 90% of their clients in the Southwest, and they said, oh, we'd love to represent someone in Worcester, I would probably knock them down a mark for that, because I would want someone who, my preference would be to have someone who knows where Stoughton is, knows what the particular challenges are here for water in Stoughton, and therefore might be able to advocate a little bit better for 1% of 1% of 1% might make a really big difference when you're talking about a settlement proposal on the table right now that's $2.8 billion or $3.2 billion, and that's just 2 out of 20 settlements. So that little extra edge could really matter in the end.
So when you talk to the two attorneys, which contact was more, I guess, from a cultural or behavioral, or you had more of a connection with as you were talking? Because you will be talking to them as the liaison passing, collecting and sharing information.
That's a really hard question to answer, to be honest with you, because I'm not actually really looking for bedside manner as much as I am for how well someone can handle themselves in a board meeting with attorneys from the federal court, 3M, DuPont, et cetera, et cetera. And so how well I achieved a rapport with any of them was kind of secondary to what kind of rapport they might have when they're talking to a federal judge. And so I think the lead counsel, Michael Stagg, certainly impressed me, and I felt that he had an excellent background in environmental litigation, particularly these kinds of cases. And this is how he built his practice, by pursuing these kinds of things. That being said, the New York law firm, they're, I hate to use the word machine because it sounds kind of derogatory, but this is their model. This is what they're built to do. So they have a stable of attorneys, a large presence. And if you look at their website, I don't know if anybody took the time to, but it's designed to handle these multi-district class action national lawsuits. And so in terms of the architecture, the presence of those partners on that level of that scene, I found that to be very impressive. And I was just imagining some role playing, right? So if you're senior corporate counsel for one of these defendants and you're negotiating a multi-billion-dollar deal, you want the counterpart on the other side of the table to be able to either say that's a good deal, a bad deal, we should talk about something else, and then present it to the federal court. So that's what I was looking for. And I think Michael Stagg has it, but certainly Napoli does. My thought initially, and I still have this thought, is that the New York law firm, because they're just built around this and nothing else, probably has an advantage in that context, in that category. That being said, you're never going to see them in Stoughton. You're going to send them paperwork, they're going to process it, they're going to plug it into their formula and do what they do. So their architecture is there, the professionalism is there, but the hands-on, the personal touch is not going to be the same as the local firm.
Mr. Carrera. I'm leaning toward the national, the New York, but anyway, Mr. Carrera.
My thought is if Sharon is with the local and Randolph is with the local, say, and we find out who's touching our borders and with them, there's always strength in numbers where you could get together and be more of a force than by yourself and apart. Is that true?
It is true, except this is affecting every community and every state. And so being one in a sea of a million isn't going to be much different than being three in a sea of a million. So I don't know if that's a huge tactical advantage, especially when so far the way the settlements have been structured, it's just data driven. And so this much contamination, this much consumption, do the math, that's the number you're going to get. So I don't know if that side of it is going to make much of a difference, but I don't know what's going to come next. You know, there's still 18 more defendants that aren't part of this settlement. And so I don't know how those cases are going to go. And so who's going to be representing this town when the negotiations start with them? I think that's the big question.
Okay. Motion on the national level. Or
Well,
it could pass or fail. You know,
yeah,
just to get a motion on the table for discussion.
Sure. So, to be honest, I could really go either way on this one. I don't have strong feelings one way or the other. But just to put a motion out there, I will move that we get the right name. We appoint Napoli Skolnick as special town counsel for the purpose of PFAS litigation.
Second. Okay. For discussion, any discussion on?
Well, yeah, I feel, as Mr. Carrera stated, I thought there was a good argument to say that since we're all neighbor communities, we can compare notes. But in previous litigation that we've been involved in, that simply never happens. Like you just as being part of the class action, like that's your strength in numbers. And so I'm not. I had the same thought you did, Mr. Carrera. I'm not sure if we get the kind of leverage that we might need. Having the national firm, one of the the profound benefits of the national firms is that things move differently in different states, and that is where they see successes in some states, they can leverage that in others, and so I can imagine that being helpful on the one hand. On the other hand, you also have to know a lot of rules about a lot of different jurisdictions in order for it to work. But if they have the manpower to do it, then great. I am very much on the fence on this one. I don't have strong feelings either way, but I do feel like both would do a great job by the town. So I'm perfectly comfortable with that.
So we have a motion on the floor. We have it seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Moving right along to our last agenda item, and that is consent agenda.
Oh, sorry, consent agenda. A, approval of open session minutes meeting of November 30th, 2023. B, Memorial Square, Joseph P. DeVito, Charles F. Large. C, intermunicipal emergency water supply agreement between the town of Stoughton and the town of Avon. And D, consider approval of finance director contract. Does anyone want to pull any of these items? Yes, Mr. Carrara.
C.
All right. Yes, Mr. Carrara.
I just got this information in this packet. I didn't know that we were even talking about doing this. So what I was wondering is, do we have information that, does Avon have any connections with Brockton?
I don't believe they have municipal agreement with Brockton. I know,
Brockton's water comes from the river.
Right.
And if we ever had a mistake and it mixes in with ours, then we got problems.
and they also have the desal plant.
Yeah.
So this interconnection is not for daily consumption, it's for emergency spikes. And the infrastructure is in place for it.
Can you, go ahead.
What I was saying, Madam Chair, is this intermunicipal agreement is an emergency agreement. Avon has real limitations as a small community. This would only be enacted in the event of an emergency, a break of a water line or some sort of shortage. It's not for the daily consumption of water from Stoughton.
Okay.
And because of investments made by the community, we have a substantial surplus water that we could benefit from selling should they have the need.
Yeah, we've invested heavily in our infrastructure for the purpose of being able to sell water, and so it's good to see our smaller, slightly smaller community neighbor benefit from that investment.
I am almost certain, to Mr. Carrera's question, that Avon does not buy water from Brockton. All of Brockton's water, incidentally, comes from the town of Kingston.
Oh.
It comes from Silver Lake. Upwards of 90% of it, and 10% comes from the desal plant, that they have a long-term agreement on that desalinization plant. And then they, in fact, sell water to the town of, I believe it's Whitman. Whitman's sole water supply is Brockton, who takes it from Kingston. It's a good deal. They just told it.
The only other question I have is, I'm not sure if we can enter into an agreement for 10 years. I thought it was no more than 3.
Brian?
With things.
May I?
Yes,
Just
Attorney Renner.
being-
To Mr. Carrera's question, for an intermunicipal agreement, the statute provides an upper limit of 10 years. So it's a special contract because it's between two governments.
That's all I had, Tom. I just was, it's first I saw of it, so I looked into it because I've seen these before.
Did it answer all your questions, Mr. Crowe? Okay. Did anyone else have any questions? Okay. Motion,
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. With there being no further business.
Motion to adjourn.
All righty, all in favor?
Well,
And I vote aye as well.
Well done,
Thank you so
members.
much. Thank you.
And
good night, everyone,
happy holidays.
and happy holidays, and we'll see you on the 28th. Bye.